The condition is really crazy condition.
And that shouldn't give away the whole secret to professional windsurfing.
Maciek Rutkowski giving Antoine elbow a run for his body. Here we go. Woo! What a finish!
The guy is kind of talking bullshit.
The team's just got to work a little harder.
Welcome to the Windsurfing Podcast, back again for episode 24. And this week we have a simmer style legend. In a time where people are changing brands from year to year, this guy has been on one brand for over 30 years. He was there at pretty much the first ever Jaws session and still charges the place today. We talk about who is his dream team, if he could pick the ultimate dream team. We talk about commentary and how he's after my job. We also talk about lots of other stuff, especially his speed drumming and how he was voted, or he won, the fastest drummer in the world at one point. Who is it? It is, of course, Kai Katchadourian.
Kai Katchadourian is in the house. Thank you so much for finding the time for coming on. Managed to do our little time zones thing. Maui morning, Europe evening, all good. How you doing?
Aloha from Maui. Great to be here, and thanks for having me. I'm used to that time difference, always communicating with my wife and family, so this is nothing new.
Yeah. So obviously people that follow you on social media would probably notice you're back and forth, kind of Hawaii, Finland, Hawaii. It's a nice contrast, isn't it? I don't think you get more different places in the world, weather-wise, and also waves and wind and all that sort of stuff. How's that dynamic working for you?
Yeah, I mean, you understand perfectly, Maciek, as I call you Baltic brother. We're sitting there in the Baltic, you in Poland and me in the Gulf of Finland. And Finland's actually where I originally learned how to windsurf back when I was about 12 years old. And that definitely, that time in Europe, the early 80s, there were a lot of windsurfers around there. But, you saw the Hawaii image already permeating in the promotion of stuff, Mistral, everybody's, Diamond Head, sunny, tropical. And you could see that translated really well in Europe. The word that you used was contrast. That's exactly right. And it's a balance of contrasts. One that requires some timing. Obviously, you can't be in two places at once, especially these days. So I haven't been back to Maui since January, 9 months gone. And luckily, my whole fluid situation that I have allows it. But I waltzed into a really big window. My arms are sore. I've been sailing constantly. And, I had actually been doing a lot of windsurfing back in Finland. They had a really good summer. You might have gotten a big piece of some of those southwesterlies we were getting over there, and even a couple of northwesterlies. I could go on and on about all the dynamics, but they do contrast well. And as long as your timing's on, you can branch off from other places. I mean, there's places I get to from Finland that I would never even be able to reach from Maui that easily. So, It's all about the timing.
Yeah, I think you told me about a direct flight to Cape Verde. Obviously, that's off the table now. But you did score like some cheeky little Scandinavian waves. Yeah. Do you feel like, I don't know, I kind of feel like it's some of the most unexplored coastline still, and there's good waves there to be had, and probably, even more for windsurfing than maybe for surfing. I don't know. It just looked like you scored, and it looks like, I don't know, when I look at the map and how I look at, how the systems develop, and it just seems like there's a lot of potential there. And I know you've done some exploring, so tell me a little bit about that.
It's, two bodies of water, the Northern Baltic versus the Gulf of Finland. And those are two fetches that we're directly related. In that sense. I mean, we like our southwests, and that's a pattern, so to speak. What we're really dealing with, though, is the difference between wave sailing and windsurfing. You know what I mean? And I think that cuts off to me, theoretically, when you're riding ground swell and wind swell. I talk about this all the time. Well, you know, the Baltic, it's wind swell world. And I kind of cut off, like, if you're in single digits on wave period, you know, 1 to 9 seconds, it's wind swell.
That's my territory.
Double digits, 10 seconds, then
that's your territory.
Well, so that's the rule of thumb. And, you know, 99.9% of the time in the Baltic, it's wind swell. So where I am and where I learned how to windsurf is our family summer home, which is about 2 hours outside of Helsinki on the south part. And the last group of islands, it's all open water. So from a very early on, when I would revisit as a proficient windsurfer, I would start, you know, sailing upwind around the corner into the mouth of the Gulf of Finland. And lo and behold, after, you know, a few summers of doing it, I started discovering some wind swell slab spots that absolutely amazed me. I, you know, won't get into exact locations, but I have actual surfing waves that when it's, you know, 2.5 meters or bigger, I'm getting 90-meter rides, you know, paddling into these little slabs. Granted, like, you can damage some pretty expensive boards with the rocks that you have to paddle over, right? That's the reality around there. But you know, for windsurfing, there's these outer slabs you can cruise around. You just have to be a little mindful. It's not some trade wind. It's a frontal low that's blowing only so long. You have to read the sides. If the wind's going to die and you've sailed 2 miles, you know, away or whatever, you know, I'm sure you've got some stories. I love your Kanaha story. I remember that night, you know, you swam in from far away. It's not exclusive to the Baltic, no, but Finland's a really mobile tribe of windsurfers, and they follow the wind around. I'm kind of not in that situation because, in my opinion, where I am at our summer home is probably like the best place to be. We sail on almost all points of the compass except northwest. When it's northwest, I'll drive 3 hours to this place called Pori and surrounding environments, and there's just a ton of places you can go there. And it doesn't even stop at Finland. As you know, I went up to Norway recently. Uncorked the Lofoten Islands and wave sailed up there for the first time, my first time, and one of the first times at some of these breaks. And that's just, you know, we're talking about the Arctic Circle now. And that's, you know, that's a whole different situation and territory. And exploration is really high on my list. I mean, wind swell or ground swell, it's like, I love Maui, and I'm getting back, you know, in touch with Maui here and using my time wisely in terms of being able to, you know, branch out on some of the other spots you can sail here as well. But it's definitely also very familiar to me finally, you know, even after this long being gone, that, you know, there are other places that are always on my mind. And like I keep saying, you can't be in 2 places at once, especially now. So you have to really kind of carve out your window and, you know, keep rolling where you like to sail. And I mean, for me, it's even more about the equipment and what you're using where. I'm starting to stash boards everywhere I go. I've got a quiver of boards in Cape Verde. I've got a bunch of boards here. I would have been screwed. I came back. Lufthansa had my gear delayed in San Francisco for the week. Well, sort of like that, but I had gear here luckily waiting for me. And then luckily it was 4/7 or I wouldn't have been sailing. So
yeah. What is it about exploration and about, I guess the first part of the question is, why do you think it feels so good when you score something that you just, you know, might not be that amazing? Like it might not be Hokipa level or whatever, but you put in all that effort to find it, and you're probably alone and whatever, and maybe you have a beautiful backdrop or something, you know, just different. And the second part of it is like, how do you become good at that? Because I talked to Thomas Traversa on this show, and he's like, yeah, it's just my hobby. I go on Google Earth and I just spent hours there, you know, and looking at forecasts and whatever. So how is that for you?
Google Earth, right back at you, and TT there, you know, like Tomas, the prototype of somebody who's, you know, gotten the work behind him in terms of the world championship and can kind of move on. He's a father, 2 beautiful daughters, and he checks the maps, and in a way, I think there's a little hometown pride too, like especially in his own home zones, you know, like he recently scored France or whatnot, and Portugal, obviously his latest exploit in Nazaré is historical. I mean, hats off. And, you know, like I think it was apparent early on, I mean, staying.
And the fact that he has to go right there, you know, like
right,
you
right into the cliff, you know, talk about going on the rocks.
Yeah.
You know, that's his exclusive territory. That's the thing I'm getting at, is that like, even with the, you know, Red Bull storm chases that he was, you know, basically dominating in one form or another, you know, he was just, became apparent that in these very extreme conditions, here's this, you know, diminutive guy on micro equipment, totally comfortable, and I mean, just like taming it. And not even that, but going, you know, radical next level in it. And so it made a huge impression on everybody, I'm sure. And, you know, definitely some of these things about, like, you know, some of the places Fabian Owenright was telling me, he was like, yeah, I was sailing up to Jaws once, and I was like, wow, man, that's kind of sketchy, you know, like, obviously everybody's, you know, watching him. Oh yeah, that's nothing. You should see what he does in France. He's like 3 hours next to this, you know, one, you know, hell forgotten cliff that he gets, you know, a little session at, and then has to, you know, hike home or something. So that's, you know, I think we're taking that a bit to the extreme. I'm sure he would tell you too, he needs to kind of slow down on the life risking activities there, because you can definitely find yourself in the middle of nowhere going, oh yeah, I scored, and then like, now what? You know, there are limits to it. You kind of have to, you know, get back to where you started from, right? It's going to be really interesting, though. I've kept in touch, you know, talking about Cabo Verde, for instance, one of my regular hits normally. And, you know, I've been in touch with Josh Angulo a lot, just, you know, tracking swells, and they're getting started with their season there. And there's a lot of places to explore there as well. You know, without naming names, it's not just limited to Sol, for sure. And Tomas been around there too. So the exploration thing, to get back at your original question, I think the incentive really is to, it's kind of twofold. You always do wonder what's out there. And I think the curiosity for me becomes overwhelming at a certain point. When you're able to, you know, see certain forecasts, here's this big low pressure that just fired off a swell in a certain direction that you might not always see. And you're like, I wonder what happened over there in Kamchatka or something, you know, like, and you know,
straight FOMO, right?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, you don't know really. There was a time where I would have only been limited to caring about what was happening in the Northern Pacific, and you know, that was it. That quickly changed the first time I went to Cabo Verde, though, in '96, and that was pretty early on in the whole deal. And from there, that really sparked it for me. I mean, even just places you can sail in your local old haunts like California, certain different combinations pop up, and then, you know, you're able to take a look at certain spots. Yeah, the nature of it.
Is it really good, like California? Because it is a little bit forgotten, isn't it? Like, it used to be, I guess, quite a lot of people sailing, and it kind of, whatever we see is kind of always a little bit side on shorey, but I bet like we don't see the best places.
I think you don't see the best places. Obviously, I would be the first person to tell you that there is a protective nature to some of the places. I mean, where I'm originally from is the Northern California coastline above Santa Cruz. And your impression of, you know, California might be more Southern California based for whatever reason. But I mean, Waddell Creek, you know, and surrounding locations there certainly get really, really good and proper down the line. Absolutely. I agree, though. Overall, there's a general, you know, side onshore quality to the wave riding, and it's not always ground swell. It's wind swell. What's cool about California is you get all these combination swells. You know, a classic day at Waddell might include like a 18-second period 4-foot south swell that's combining with this, you know, slow rolling northwest wind swell, and you just get these ridiculous setups that are, you know, rolling from the North Bowl 2 bottom turns into this South Death Bowl that just goes sandpipe, blast a thing. You know, you really learn how to hit the lip at a place like that, because you're dealing with all these different elements. It's a really cool spot. I mean, like, it's kind of the equivalent of a Ginsho, for instance. The lone exception that it actually blows all day. It doesn't start windy at 7 o'clock like the Nortada.
Yeah. So you mentioned San Francisco, Santa Cruz area. That's where you're originally from, I guess. There's not much internet info about the old flycatcher, and I felt like normally I call around and I ask around, and I'm like, shit, let him just tell his story, like let him just tell how he got to Maui and how that whole windsurfing. You already said you actually started windsurfing in Finland, which I had no clue about. I thought it was just maybe San Francisco Bay Area or something, and then we want to windsurf, let's go to Maui or whatever. So how was that? How did you actually land in there?
Yeah, I mean, let's say we started that story already with me learning how to windsurf in Finland. Well, then the rest of the year I'm a kid growing up in Palo Alto, California, in the Bay Area, which is notoriously windy. I will call the San Francisco Bay Area the most, hands down, as far as an urban windsurfing environment, it's the best place in the world.
Bring on a racing event there, please. That would be so sick.
Yeah, well, yeah. Yes. Can't wait to see you there. I've seen many, done a few. And as far as the diversity of wind and everything, that really hits home. So I was, once I learned in Finland, and we're talking about like 83, 84 here. What's happening with windsurfing in 83 and 84 is that it is going through quantum leaps of development, and it's leaving the entry level behind. Here comes the camber inducer. Here comes the RAF. Here comes the full batten sail. Here comes monofilm. Where's the beginner board? It's all this. I learned on the narrowest, unstable longboard as a 11-year-old kid falling off constantly. It's these things that you realize that your grace and balance get you through more than anything. Anyway, so the Bay Area really toughened me up. Sailing Waddell by about 15 in the winter time really got me. But I was also looking at Maui, memorizing every magazine, totally dead set. There was a Waddell wave contest where the Wetter brothers and Eric Sharp and Ian Boyd showed up. And Ian Boyd in particular had this model, he had moved from California and gone to high school as a 14-year-old. And once I met Ian and, quizzed him for hours about his situation, it became apparent that was maybe something I wanted to kind of try and pull off. So that summer I went to the Gorge with my mom to race in the Pro-Am. And I met this photojournalist by the name of Arleon Dibignon. Very, very kind woman who just immediately, answered all my questions and elaborated on them, gave me all this information. Actually, I was kind of like, before I even hinted at it, she kind of just drew me into this, like, yeah, I can find you a family, So behind my parents' back that fall after the Gorge, I kind of had it all lined up. I figured out with Arleon, a family to, it was a husband and wife, Ron and Diane Sondate at the time, and they took me in as a 16-year-old in Paia. So really all this mattered at this point was that my sister Nina had gone off to college already. It was just myself and my parents in the house over there at Stanford. And I was going sailing at Waddell every day, driving an hour to go do it. So once I had all my info down, okay, I'm going to go to Baldwin High School, and I'm going to move to Maui. I'm a Haole kid. Here we go. We're going to take on the world, right? And so I dropped it to my parents. I was like, I've got this all figured out. And, was lucky enough, to know Ian Boyd, and they had met him, and I used him as, a key example. Well, this wasn't an immediate yes or no answer either. I just remember that particular fall, there was a lot of windsurfing going on at Waddell. I was doing a lot of driving as a 15-year-old, running over the hill and
in Europe, you can't even fathom that, like a 15 or a 16-year-old, driving to windsurf.
Sure. Let alone that we're going to let him just move to Maui. The O'Neill Invitational was coming up, and that was kind of this earmark where I had used the O'Neill as kind of like, okay, I want to compete in the O'Neill if I can. And you know, I might be better off doing a whole, you know, semester there because I can train and get used to it. Oh, and by the way, Mom, I saw a half-eaten elephant seal on the beach at Waddell today, a great white shark attack. So anyway, you know, that would have been an interesting viewpoint, watching my parents debate that with their friends, you know, they're in the affluent Stanford educational community. There'd be a couple of people who'd be like, yes, you should give them the chance. There'd probably be a lot of like, hell no kind of responses. It's a really, you know, educated background, and let's just say that, you know, did not resonate with everybody there. But
yeah,
you know, it came back as a yes. And so my mom, you know, flew me over there at the end of January, and I was there, and not windy right away, but getting slowly acclimated. But the first day I sailed Hokipa, there was one other person out, and it was a pretty hairy day. I remember it was this really blusterly kind of northeast day, and I was actually out alone for a little while, and then someone else buzzed out, and it's Laird Hamilton was out there windsurfing with me, you know, giving me the stare down. Who is this kid? And, you know, maybe like 5 minutes after that, he zooms around. I remember vividly that like I was up at middles, and like a 10-foot set came in. There's my mom watching on the beach, you know, this 10-foot set comes in, and I'm closing out, and I just barely squeaked over the thing. And you know, survived that obviously, and then went on the rocks for some dumb reason after that. It was like the set should have cleaned me up, but that was that. You know, I was dialed in. I did the O'Neill. There was a junior worlds competition. I started, you know, Sierra Emery, Rush Randall became, you know, really good friends of mine, you know, brought me under their wing. Sasha Maillet, you know, the Angulo brothers, obviously all three of them, Mark, Josh, and Andy. What Baldwin High School was like was a little rough. And what I remember about Baldwin, you know, being a public school, is I kind of sold that to my folks, and that might have been the element that you know, they were not comfortable with, because I kind of came in there as a Howley kid, and it's survival back then. They had fully had Kill Howley Day going on, and you know, me and Micah Buzinas were running for our lives. It was hairball, but we ended up transferring to a Catholic high school called St. Anthony, which is actually where all the windsurfers ended up going. That's where Ian went, you know, for a while, Eric Sharp and all these other people. So that allowed you to have a little more time off. It was a little more lenient, smaller school. You have to wear a uniform, so, you know, get out of school, rip off your uniform, get in your shorts, drive to Hokipa or Kanaha. And that was a good existence. And that was, you know, Maui and Hokipa in the late 80s, which was phenomenal. And, you know, tightened up my relationship with Simmer Style, which, you know, still today is going, which is, you know, kind of the origin of that. I kind of got handed off from the California distributor to Maui. So I met Malta and Klaus, and, you know, started, you know, continuing that whole journey. But it wasn't, you know, I think my parents did a good job in forcing me to kind of, you know, look at what it would take to not just rely on sailing. You know, I had job, you know, even at like 16 or 17, I washed dishes at this French restaurant called La Vie en Rose, which everybody who back in the day was on Maui will remember. It's this phenomenal place in Paia, this whole culture behind it, really amazing place. And like, yeah, you know, you're going to high school, you're working La Vie en Rose, you've been working high-tech rentals a bit and sailing. And that's what it was all about. And I remember finally all that was going on back then. You're just a starstruck kid on the island of Maui, just, you know, hacking away and sailing some big waves and some amazing things going on. And man, the stories I could tell about that time, you know, the golden age of windsurfing in the 80s and these huge contests. And here comes, you know, the Peter Stuyvesant, you know, deal, and descending World Cup 3 discipline events at Hokipa. Let me tell you, no room on the beach. You wouldn't see the sand up to pavilions, rigs everywhere. The entire beach, you know, was covered. And, you know, it was hoopla and hype. Not everybody loved it, obviously. A lot of people couldn't stand it. And, you know, kind of being a kid going to high school and seeing the other perspective of it, I definitely was fed a lot of perspective from some of my other friends who hated the windsurfers, you know, in the
Didn't give you
contest.
popularity at school, I guess. The fact of being a windsurfer.
Not a windsurfer, a wind kook.
Wind cook, yeah.
And, you know, that's self-evident, right? You know, like it's really cool to see now today. I think, you know, the wind kook you're still a wind kook, you know, fine. But windsurfing, I feel, has taken a turn in terms of the acceptance in where it was standing back then. As, you know, granted, maybe a kookier sport in a sense. You know, the whole quantum leap of development was based on a few things, wasn't it? It was based on these parameters of a tour that valued high speed and you know, being able to sail upwind. The equipment followed. Why were we riding these narrow needle-nosed things after all? Well, they were fast. You could do giant backwoops. What happened to jumping now? You know, we're riding these minorly fin boards that you can slice around. Or you see, you know, with the exception of a few people, you know, the jumping, it's all in balance. I think people, you know, in a year like now have had time to think about like where the sport should go, you know, competitively or otherwise. I don't really know what I hear in the rumblings of the PWA, but, you know, I certainly hope that we still see the diversity of Pozo and Maui, a few things mixed in, because what I will say about back in that golden 80s era was that Maui there was 2, if not 3 events there a year. And it upset the balance considerably. There was, you know, slackers like me who made careers out of just being Hokipa sailors. You know, granted, I did the tour a little bit, but, you know, I was one of those guys.
Yeah.
And that served it well. I think you're seeing a lot of the focus on wave sailing actually is very diverse. There's a lot of places you can do it, like we were saying.
Yeah, it is. And it's almost like 2 worlds, like you say, the windswell world and the groundswell world. And, you know, the windswell world probably more about jumping and more about moves, you know, and then the groundswell world more about, you know, speed, power, and flow and whatever. But we'll get to all that. We're in the 80s in Maui.
Okay, we're still in the 80s.
We're still
so
in
I've got
the
my
80s.
Oakley blades on. I'm
Exactly.
thinking about like Mark Angulo
Got a
driving his
mallet.
Honda CRX, Oakley blades, Billabong T, and he's like flying through Maliko Gulch at like 80 miles, and he like zooms around, and he's doing goose screws. And man, the Neil Pride team's pretty gnarly. There's like 100 people on it, and Tiga's rolling around. You know, Fanatics not to be forgotten with their ART cutaway sail. Simmer's in the house. You know, Simmer was such a cool brand to ride for because Malta, you know, had set the course for the radical image that it portrayed. Malta was my hero, and, you know, to this day still is, because he was just charging these gigantic lips, no hope, just mast and half high under the lip. You know, I wonder if Traversa took a page out of Malta's book, if you even saw that, you know, like that's the idea. If I eat it, I eat it, you know, but that moment was, you know, good, but, you know, you saw people starting to connect. I mean, I had some heavy teammates on Simmer. You know, Paul Bryan from neighboring island of Kauai there is the heaviest hitter you would not believe. And these are things you don't see, but I mean, this was later on. This wasn't the 80s. The 80s was the Euros versus the Hawaiians. And, you know, the Simmer team was kind of, you know, stacked with Hawaiians, but we had a couple of the Euros also on there. I mean, we had Anders and Seeger. And, you know, this was all playing out. You know, you would think, yeah, team. Windsurfing's not a team sport in that situation. It's like, you know, you got this like complete, like, different agendas working on. Yeah, they're sailing on the same brand, but, you know, it's a World Cupper versus a Hokipa guy, and that took its time to kind of melt over. It doesn't exist today at all. It's interesting. But that was kind of the key thing. And, you know, you had that because the people who had the Hokipa titles were, you know, Dave Kalama, Mark Angulo, Polakau. You know, these guys, you know, were holding it down. And at that point, you're kind of defending.
It's funny because these are the guys that you'd also like to watch, especially Mark and Polakau, on video. This is the guys that you know, and it seems like nowadays the contest guys are not necessarily the best free sailing guys. You know, it's somewhere there in that area, you know, but it's, yeah, I don't know. I'm just really interesting. Like, you rock up in, I don't know, 88 or 86 or whatever. You rock up at Hokipa on a random day, and what do you see? You know, and who's the standout? And what's the feeling? Is the feeling really like, okay, I'm in the windsurfing world's belly button right now. I'm like in the middle of the, you know, because
yeah, no, I mean, it was 87, like the beginning of 87. But what I showed up to Maui on the heels of was this monumental 86 Aloha Classic, which was, you know, double plus mast high, Rich Myers getting eaten, you know, the most monumental wave event of all time. And it was, you know, what that transferred into was the O'Neill contest in the spring. So what I'm seeing now, what I saw when I showed up to Maui in 87 was people were starting to do forwards. Cesare Contagali in the 86 event was running the cheese roll, you know, kind of splatting it. And then in between that time, Dave Kalama in a Dekainad rolled the first actual sheeted in forward. My friends and I were conceptualizing this. And, you know, this Dekainad was monumental because you saw him like kind of plant it. Well, I'm sailing Hokipa watching Dave Kalama do that in my face. And I'm like, you know, a little bit psyched. My roommate at the time was Maui Meyer. You know, he was a legend. And he and I were at Specs one day and, you know, like forced ourselves to start trying it. And I did a couple splats, and I remember he did a perfect one right in front of me. So the forward was happening going into the O'Neill, but there were variations of it. And there was guys who were going a little more sideways, and there was guys like Matt Schweitzer and especially Brett Lickle, who were just going like end over end, boom, end over end, like literally end over end forwards. And those were spectacular to watch, especially with those high aspect rigs everybody was using.
Yeah, it was cool back then, wasn't it? Not so cool anymore.
So that was going on. The O'Neill contest happened, and that was a big one because I remember fondly that, you know, Mark Angulo got to the top of the single elimination, and then here comes Ian Boyd at 16 years old and double eliminates him and wins it. So Ian at 16, you know, person I went to school with, you know, won that event. It was overwhelmingly inspiring for me. It was like just hugest thing you could have ever watched. It is, you know, really emotional in a sense of just like, wow, look what, you know, like happened there. And motivation was so big after that for me personally, you know, to break through, which, you know, the 80s, it was not my time yet. I started getting top 5, you know, once the 90s hit. That's when, you know, I had found my stride and learned how to compete, you know, learn how to not let an 8-minute heat psych you out. Granted, back then, what did they judge you on? They judged you on wave riding jumps and transitions. So you had to sit there and whip helicopter tacks and, you know, like, yeah. The contest thing. So, you know, 3 events a year up to, I think by 91, you had the Hard Rock, the O'Neill, and the Aloha Classic. And so that was a, you know, that was a really a huge era that didn't last too long. And, you know, rightfully so. I think that even the local community just got totally sick of all these contests. And, you know, here we are, you know, not being able to do the Aloha this year, but the fact that, you know, for the track record that was able to continue, you know, for 10 years. And I think everybody saw the importance of the current PWA tour and otherwise that, you know, it brought some diversity to it. And, you know, you gotta, I think there's a really good relationship now in the competitive sense of what Hokipa meant to windsurfing in terms of back then. I think that's kind of translated to now, both in the image of the sport and just competitively.
Yeah. Do you get this feeling like back then, like the importance of these contests, the importance of Hokipa, the importance over the years, or just, you know, all the brands developing Hawaii, whether it be racing, wave sailing, whatever it would be, you know, all the R&D being there, etc. That has somehow been a little bit lost over the years, correct?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that you'll ever see it, completely center of the universe. I think that what people did was they learned how things are done here and, like transferred that along. I think there's been a lot of technology that's been borrowed from what's been developed here. Well, granted, I mean, Maui's gone through all the cycles. I mean, Clark foam blanks. They used to get boards from Craig Masonville at High Tech, watch that get done. So, I mean, we saw the whole thing. We saw the sandwich construction and all this stuff. Ideas kind of do bounce around here. It'll always remain a developmental hub. In terms of, the actual production or construction, that's a different story. But what's going to happen, and I think what you've seen in the past too, is that, stuff that gets developed here, you've got to be careful that it's not only going to work here, because Maui is a unique environment to its own, and that there is, a certain sense of certain designs that will work here and not everywhere else. And, I must say that, we're going to plug something, this board right here that we developed, the Flywave, we made sure that it worked, not just it'll keep up. Yeah. And that has a little bit to do with, tuning fins and whatnot. In terms of stuff where it's going now with foiling, and I mean, the unbelievable amount of options that you're presented, with what you can do with the wind and the waves. And I think it's environmental, depending on where you are, how consistent your environment is. And that's why I think Maui is always going to be on the map, because it has certainly got the quantity of sailing. Generally speaking, we're seeing it right now. I mean, these last days, all the wind we're getting right now is making up for, the whatever October, they had here. And, you notice that that's, the swing of the pendulum. And yeah, I see, everybody down at the Poa Cannery, guys are working on boards, and it's business as usual here.
Yeah, definitely. So picked of the 80s, 90s, you kind of get on tour a little bit, but I'm not sure if this is something you want to get. Like you say, you kind of do your Maui thing really well, and then the rest of the tour, it seems like the like you say, the Hawaiians, Josh said it really well, first time he went to Pozo, he was like, is this wave sailing? Like, are these waves? But then, being a competitor, he kind of humbled himself a little bit, and, okay, let's try to learn this. And this is windsurfing as well. This is wave sailing, but it's, or as you call it, this is windsurfing, not wave sailing, but it is part of it. And it's just something totally different. Right. And my question is like, how far, because it is these two worlds, and Maui is like, when I got there, I felt like it was very, it's sort of, it's almost not real world. You know what I mean? It's like,
I know.
And it feels like everybody kind of feeds into that. And once you're there, you start feeling that way as well,
Well, it's a really unique environment. I mean, it's got a lot of energy and vibrant, conditions. I think that you're feeding off of it. You kind of mutate. It is environmental. I mean, I agree with you there. It's kind of like, it's a career. It's a life decision. Like you see people who you build careers based on results, which will then, legitimize their earnings or, their position in the sport, versus clearly people who are only, or not only, but the number one thing they're into it for, and count me amongst those, is the sailing. And, you're into it for the sailing because you're obsessed with the sport and you want to ride the best gear, and you want, to travel if you can, or just be in the right place at the right time where you sail. And I think that, all those requirements there within above, I mean, how important equipment is and what it can do, to enhance your experience with sailing. And that should be the drive of whatever we're trying to do as a whole. I mean, competitive windsurfing is, like I said, it's not a team sport. It's this individual thing that you're trying to achieve. I like the team ethic myself. I'm a really team-oriented person, but I mean, I've just seen it for too many years where it's, so individualized. But when you're developing, with a team of people and working on designs and stuff, that's you know, much more team oriented. It's much more
Well,
kind of forward.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is when you get to Maui, you get this feeling like, what you guys doing over there in Europe, it's okay, but it's not the real thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you know, I think that's the way people might have used to thinking. And then you look at Thomas Traversa down in, you know, Cal Point in France and what he's scoring there. Believe me, like, everybody's eyes are wide open to what the world has to offer, conditions wise. And I mean, Maui's got the reputation. I'll be honest about Maui. It's quantity over quality a lot of the time. A place like Cape Verde is going to be quality over quantity a lot of the time, and your balance of being there, you know, in terms of when it's, you know, really firing is one thing, but all the we're in this era where people are figuring out their environments, and you're seeing these sessions go down in places where people have figured it out, that this place fires under this, you know, environment. We've got enough people windsurfing at a high level worldwide that they're venturing out in some stuff. Where's this place down in Australia? You know, like, it's a really never been a better time to be a windsurfer than now in terms of what it can offer you gear wise, and then what's on the map. Because I mean, Google Earth will tell you a lot of things. It won't tell you how windy it is right at that moment. I mean, we got Windy app or whatever other, you know, millions of tools that consume our lives to forecast every day. You know, like, what happened to the old just look out the window and see a tree move, right? You know, let's go sailing and look at the water. That's kind of the purity of it. Like, I spend enough time, you know, trying to forecast where to be and fly that, you know, like, there is kind of a beauty of it, doing, you know, your own thing. So we're not in a time right now where you can travel, you know, freely. So we're really, I think there is and has been in the last, you know, 9 months, a lot of people discovering their local areas more. And that's kind of been the beauty of it. I mean, I went through the same thing in Finland and realized that, you know, like, there is no place like home. It's a little bit more like the same way I appreciate Maui, you know, if I'm not here all the time.
Yeah.
So that's.
Yeah, I explored Poland and I didn't find anything new, but that's beyond the point.
Come up and visited me, man. You're welcome anytime.
Yeah, but then when we talk about this difference between Maui and Europe, it came up when I interviewed John Sky, and we were talking about this selling as for equipment, selling the dream, versus selling the function. You know what I mean? And you being involved with Simmer a lot. I wonder what's your take on that, being obviously a Maui guy, you know, all the photo shoots being done in Maui and whatever, and everybody wants to sail the way, you know, the way Levi, Brasinho, whatever,
right,
these guys sail in Hokipa, but your reality and your environment might not be that. And then your gear, you should choose it accordingly. But at the same time, you're still dreaming to, you know, I still want to ride like Polakau in about time, you know, but you know what I mean? So what's your take on that?
Well, if you're going to use that as an example, look at that era of what boards prioritized, and specifically those strapper boards he was riding. What did they do? They looked to me to be like reverse feed, low entry rocker, fast boards that had, you know, a snappy tail, a lot of release, but mainly what Polakau's game was about speed. He sailed fast. He bottom turned like a blur and was a master of manipulating the pocket. Still is, obviously. I sailed with him the other day. You know, cut forward to what got prioritized now. There's a lot of things that led to the way boards are now, and what we're prioritizing more on wave riding is just simple placement and being able to, you know, turn powerfully in a couple different angles. The way I approach it might be different the way, you know, Levi approaches it. Every wave's different here. You know, Hokipa is a spot that will throw you so many different looks that you want to have a level of adaptation to it, that you can kind of take a couple different approaches. But what I really find, again, prioritizing in my own game is mobility and speed. And that doesn't necessarily have to come with volume. And that's got more to do with efficiency. And, bringing up, free sailing versus, competitive sailing. What I remember about when Francisco Goya won his world title, if you want to bring up, arguably the best free sailor who won a world title, like that became very much part of his game is, an efficient board, but maybe, going small and efficient. I think there's something to be said about that. What I'm noticing right now, sailing Hokipa with under 20 people every day, sometimes as few as 10, is that I'm undersizing some of my rigging decisions to go with a freer feeling rig because I'm not battling a crowd of people. And that's been really refreshing because, the old adage of, go all the way outside with the most mobile rig. And then I found, sailing overpowered all the time. It's been a real eye opener to, the freedom I feel on the wave face when I'm riding like that. And efficiency of gear. I think it's, especially me, look, I'm almost 50 years old, man. I need the gear that's going to allow me to do a lot of work for me. And that's the goal right now, is to make it as enjoyable as possible with as much capability as possible.
And the new gear really does that. It is amazing, the stuff we're riding now. Like if you pick up something from 20 or even from 10 years ago, it's nowhere near, But what I guess what I'm trying to ask you is, if a guy from a local side onshore beach in Norway comes up to you for gear advice, and you tell him he needs that fast kind of onshore design, and he'll tell you, yeah, but it's not sexy. You know what I mean? I want to do what you guys are doing over there in Maui, And there's this little, I wonder if if your onshore design photo shoot shouldn't be in freaking silt, because that's what people actually do with that. You know what I mean? We're kind of selling dreams, and it's amazing because, I grew up watching that, all the VHSs I had were from Maui basically, or whatever. But yeah, there is something to be said there for sure.
Well, selling the dream, the real world board phase or whatever, I feel the adage has just much more to do with, approaching the conditions appropriately. And you will be in a situation where the conditions can be quite marginal, but if you have the right equipment, it's a blast. And this doesn't, translate into all of a sudden it's sunny and 80 degrees. The reality is you're sailing where you're sailing. You can turn it into the dream with the gear. There's no question, that is true. And your point's, well taken, is the gear has become, front row and center, what's actually speaking the language of how we ride. And it's enabling everything. And that comes right down to, what fins you're using and how important that is, something that's, overlooked perhaps. And, board, sail, and fin all, in a perfect harmony there. And you've got it in the right situation, I don't care if it's 10-foot Punta Preta or half a foot Finland, I'm still having fun. And that's kind of being able to purvey it. I just feel that, things have definitely gravitated away from this Hawaii-centric focus for the most part. I think that there is some levity in it. I think the pictures look the best because of the color. And that's always been the thing. Simmer is a Maui-based brand in terms of its imagery, but it's a worldwide brand. And that's got to translate as well. So I think you have it right there.
Yeah. Speaking of Simmer, 30 years you're involved there. Rider, any other shape or form. And I don't think many people know what your actual role there is, so tell us a little bit about that and how this came about from being a rider to getting involved more on the, let's say, business side, which is maybe a little bit
any business that survives has to have a plan. I've known Thomas Persson for a very long time before he took over. My initial relationships were with the Simmer brothers when I was a rider who had moved to Maui. The license, shifted over at the beginning of this century, right around then anyway. I have a lucky coincidence in terms of my background in Finland, and that there's a very strong presence of simmer in Sweden. And that is due to my friends at the shop at Surfers Varberg, and also Thomas at the time living in Sweden. And so there was a lot going on there. It's something that's, pretty deeply ingrained. This is far later though. I basically never found it valuable to, jump ship and shop around for sponsors. I would certainly say I took less to stay in the same position that I have as a rider. The business end of things has been a little bit more based on that. I find a lot of people want what I ride. And I've probably, started a small industry just based on my used gear. So, it's translated into that, back when I had ridden for other board sponsors like Quattro for 10 years and stuff, that you get the ball rolling in a sense before a company goes production. In Simmer's case, that they decided to start making boards was a really monumental decision, and it took a little while for it to get its groove on, and the construction, right, and all these things. I have so much respect for all the brands out there that are doing this and sacrificing what they are to make it work. And I believe in my heart that we all do it for the sailing. I do. I mean, I think that if you do it for the sailing and the love of the sport, the money will come. If you're only doing it for the money, then you're probably not putting out a product that will maximize your sailing. And that's kind of, the very surface of it. But I mean, you got to do it for the love, and gear wise, I think with Simmer, it's always been about that. I think that the number one thing, even getting into flat water designs and, trying to transfer into even race sails. I mean, these aren't you can't just, you're somebody who does absolutely everything in windsurfing. And I mean, I don't think that everybody aspires to that. And I'm certainly trying to tick all the boxes. And any brand such as an RRD or a Nash that tries to do absolutely everything has a lot on their shoulders. And while Simmer has progressively gone into making more and more equipment that, covers all these bases, they remain a core windsurfing brand. And that's something I'm really proud to be a part of, because that's my ethic too. I think everything kind of corners off of around that. And that's, depending again on where you are and where you sail. But it's never been a better time. And yeah, I'm super happy with the gear. And I look around too. I look at all the other brands' gear and I'm going, yeah, I have no problem having a high opinion about, some other brands' equipment. That's what it's all about. I think we're feeding off of each other at any rate anyway. I mean, we're all on the same team. I like to try and say that even though we're not, but we kind of are. So, keep pushing.
We kind of are, because if we expand windsurfing as a sport, if we make it more fun, if we make it more accessible, if we make it just a better sport, we'll all benefit.
Yeah,
so
it's kind of selfish. Like, I've got this board that's really good. You can't ride it.
Yeah. So I think it's really, you touched on that with the technology and with everything. I find it really underrated from the public what a process it actually is to prototype, test, and produce equipment. Like you said, like the construction, like one little thing doesn't add up and it's already a major fuck up, and you have to.
Yeah, it's overwhelming, and you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And I've certainly learned that firsthand. I was forced to make a very big decision with the Simmer board project 10 years ago, and that was leaving Quattro. And that was a big ask at the time. Why? Because I rode the best boards, and Keith Tabul watches me sail every day, and these are friends of mine that I've been sailing with for 20 years. I do feel like in that particular decision that possibly everybody who would have been in my position probably would have done what I did. Not everybody, but most everybody. But the point is also that I back to the same ethic of we're all here doing the same thing, sort of. We have our different, avenues of how we approach it. And it's all good. I make sure that, the relationships with the people and the brands that I have ridden for, stay on the up and up. That it can be pretty chippy out there, I'm sure
Especially in the racing world, I can tell you.
I was just going to start talking about the racing world, right? Yeah, I hear you, brother. And my interest in racing probably lies in the commentary booth, but I do watch, and I learn a lot about what I think it's interesting to see from the rider perspective, and then from what they're trying to portray to the spectator to make it more interesting, and how that's gone through all those differences. I wonder how the Olympics are going to be now with this new equipment. Fascinating.
Would be cool, yeah. Yeah, so when you watch these things, when you watch these events that you're not necessarily so invested in as let's say that you're invested in from maybe more of a brand point, or like what do you actually see? What do you look for, and where do you think it's headed?
Yeah, I mean, the people who are dominating, and some eras you have this singular figure who's just cleaning up and dominating constantly. It seems like there's a little bit more parity right now at the top. There's not as much, it's not always going to be a certain individual. So in a way, that tells me the gear is even more important than ever. I kind of look like, I like my perch as some sort of fantasy gambler. I'm going to put, money down on this guy and turn it into a betting thing and really get into it. It's, and what is the premonition? Of course, it's performance based, but you're looking at, something that is akin to a horse race in a sense. And you could bet lots of money on it and have a, lucrative gambling league on racing. And that would be cool to kind of get into the dynamics of you and your rider that you're betting on. There's some money to be made there, right? I wonder how
you take your emotions out of it, bet against your own rider.
Right. Pick your rider and, whip him into shape or her into shape, and then, take it from there. That's, gambling and how it's permeated leagues like the NFL. I mean, why not? Let's gamble on slalom racing.
Yeah,
big bucks.
Definitely something. I just think generally sports in the States or in North America in general, we can, as in PWA is let's face it, it's mostly a European based entity, even though the office and the address is in Hawaii and whatever. But I think we could learn a lot from American sports in terms of, that's one thing, gambling and just fantasy windsurfing and all that is one thing, but just the whole fanfare with which American sports are run, and it's all about the show. It's only totally. And all about the show. And
what's at stake? There's this. This is what's at stake. This is what's riding on it. And you have that. And I say all this, as a fan of windsurfing, a huge fan, and I do pay attention, and I do have my favorites, and then that turns into something, right? So I think everyone's like that. I'm sure you are. It's a little different when you're directly involved in the game. I think to someone who's not a racer looking at it, that's a different perspective. But again, I'm pretty sold on the fact that the gear is a really huge part of it too.
And what's funny is it's really close. Some stuff performs a little bit better in some conditions and in others and whatever. But if everything's tuned to the highest level, you end up in a final with 8 guys, and after a 400-meter reach, there's half a board difference. It's insane. If you think about it, it's insane how far it's come. It's like in Formula One that you see, this guy just dominated. He won by 0.8 of a second.
Right.
It's kind of similar. And this what's at stake and this kind of all this pathos, I don't know if that's a word in English, but all this making everything big. You're watching the NBA finals and, and you feel the guy lost and you feel for him, and then you realize that the guy's making 40 million a year.
Yeah. What you're saying too, based on who's in front of those races, is that there's a lot more parity in the racing right now. So it's not anybody's game. I mean, there's the top guys, you being amongst them, and it's not like this era that I saw when Dunkerbeck would just be lengths ahead and winning all these races. And that credit to him for all his titles, but it almost seemed like nobody had a chance on some of these horses and the equipment and whatnot. But somebody that far ahead, we're not seeing that anymore.
Yeah.
Are we?
Do you think that played a lot in the demise of competitive windsurfing and the whole circus shrinking quite a little bit?
What I think happened to racing was that there was a specific type of equipment that was being prioritized on certain courses that were staples in this, and it never changed for a while in the terms of the parameters of what you needed to do to win a race. Have blistering board speed, a couple jibes, I don't think it was as well thought out as it could have been, and it certainly favored Dunkerbeck, who just cleaned up. I mean, I'm not saying there's no reason. The guy was a multiple time world champion, both in, waves and in racing. But I mean, I remember, one of the first people that made noise was Finian Maynard. Finally at one point, duct tape on his ear, came and, started winning some races. That's tough stuff. I mean, Dunky's tough as nails. I mean, that's a run of dominance that you just don't see. Yeah, the equipment had something to do with it, but there was also just the X factor of the Terminator just, holding it down. You got to give him credit. Was it bad for the sport? I don't think we need to go that far. I think that you saw something, in its absolute peak of peaks that was just untouchable for a while, and nothing ever lasts like that unless it reinvents itself constantly. And really looking at that era of windsurfing in the early 90s when it was like peaked out and you had, all these events and the PBA at the time, the surfing world was looking at windsurfing like, how can we be like that? I mean, I always, put surfing on such a huge pedestal in terms of like, what the athletes in that sport are able to do and the place of it, the surfing tour back in 91, say when like Slater won his first title, that wasn't much of a tour. They put their foot down somewhere around 95, not just for the money and the accolades, and the corporate sponsorship, but for the locations. And you saw that, we're going to G-Land now. We're going to go to these good spots and we're going to turn this into a good tour. Well, surfing built a model there, but you could tell that they were looking, a little bit at windsurfing like these guys are making big bucks and this is a corporate thing. And I I don't think I was realizing it at the time, but what is that kind of thing when you say you're surfing in Europe? You could say you're doing like how many different sports, right? Well, is it all one big ball of wax now? Are you, at core, are you a windsurfer who surfs and possibly foils and wings and maybe kites and surfs? I don't know. You tell me. It's certainly a really good time to do all of those things, depending where you are, right? I mean, it's just getting better and better.
Yeah. I wonder like people being there on, on tour at that time when the sport kind of grew smaller, and like were the guys realizing what was going on and seeing surfing on the rise and whatever. I just wonder like whether it could actually be stopped, or was it just a thing of like, okay, kiting came along and so many other outdoor activities and possibilities that, windsurfing for a while was the only one, pretty much. So yeah.
It seems like fairly recently, some of these barriers have been melted down. You're not just a windsurfer or a kiter or, credit Kai Letty, credit Rush Randall, credit these guys who did it all.
Yeah.
And we're able to, utilize the merits of all of these different sports. I mean, look no further than Kai Letty, who's, highly proficient at everything and has escaped, I think, being categorized. I mean, for a little while there, he was like the stand-up. That was like his main thing. He's erased that. He is not being tied to any particular sport. The fondest thing about Kai to me is that he continues to pump windsurfing and windsurfs, and you can see he holds it in a high regard. And what that's done to the public perception of the sport is just awesome. So, and you're seeing it. I have Brazinho at Jaws earlier this year.
Insane.
Guys are like, from the surfing world, Poncho Sullivan does this post like, this guy's going under the lip on a 20-foot wave. Yeah, he is. So we're still wind kooks, right? But I think things have been put in a very rightful place with everything.
Yeah. So you've been Wind Cook Simmer team captain for a while now.
Yeah, I guess I escaped, my role with the company. I just buttered over that one. I'm not quite the guy who wasn't invited to the party and won't leave, but I'm lingering around in a role that gave me, like, once team captain came around, that gave me this, that extended it sort of indefinitely, right? Because, we're not trying to win the Stanley Cup here or anything.
Yeah.
And, quite akin to it, like, even, like world titles aside, is that, I must say that, being team captain, I've dealt with a lot of, really interesting personalities on the team over the years. And it's a really interesting position to be in because of the fact that, competitively speaking, that's not, the number one thing that, I'm doing. I'm portraying the brand. I'm a brand ambassador that, can talk to anybody, anywhere, anytime. I'm not trying to be the best in the world. I'm trying to show that the gear I ride is the best in the world. That's where I'm coming from. And the number one thing that gets that done is going out and sailing and, talking and showing it up at the beach. And, that really goes a long way in a place like Maui right now. I'll tell you that. Thanks to guys like Jimmy Hepp and the Fishbowl Diaries and any of the number of other awesome local photographers here at Eric Aders and everybody living here. It's still the center of the universe in that sense. And, we're really blessed to have, the environment we're in here. It's great to be back in the part of that lineup. And I think that, for Simmer, especially, being a home Maui brand, it's really reassuring. And I feel like right now, we can look ahead. There was no Aloha Classic. I feel like we can really look ahead to what the IWT and the PWA together are going to be able to do for wave sailing. And some of these, really interesting exploits of, all these environments that, might on paper, totally seem really attractive. I mean, I've always, told Simeon whenever I've spoken to him, the director of the IWT, that, I really felt as much of a symbiotic relationship that can exist there would be a good thing because, we've got up and coming riders on Simmer style that, are facing a decision. Do you want to become a PWA rider or do you want to, run the IWT events, or what's that path? And I think for, an up and coming rider that we have on Simmer is Noam Artsy here on Maui. He's a 16-year-old kid, reminds me a lot about, who I was at that time. Just full of enthusiasm, loves sailing Hokipa, but also wants to, carve a career path. What's his, decision right now? Head on down to Pozo and, start getting gritty. And yeah, that's probably part of it if you want to be world champion, and rightfully so. But luckily for him, and let's hope that Hokipa holds that, allure and mystique too. And that's kind of, as a brand with Simmer investing in Noam, we're looking at that, importantly, that Maui is a part of Simmer's image. And, my ties to it, I think right now, I probably spend under half a year here. Less. So, it's good. You gotta, hand the torch to the local kid, in that sense. My role is always going to be, representing the brand. I have all these different pockets around the world that I am able to do that. So that's kind of
hopefully that path, like you say, is going to be unified, and that, like you say, there's going to be where I think we're right now too small of a sport to divide it further, But
I totally agree. Yes.
Foremost. My question is, as a team captain, and you spoke about slalom and watching that, And Robbie Nash said if the level of stoke, of sharing the stoke, could be quantified, that's what he would sponsor guys by, categorize guys by, let's say, or rank guys. What is some of the things you look at when you want to sponsor a guy, or a guy writes you a sponsorship request? Or
That's a great question. I'm really glad you asked that. And you have, people who are in it for a lot of different reasons. And we here at Simmer Style look for people who love windsurfing first and foremost above everything else. That's the root of it all, man. Somebody who goes out no matter how big, small, cold, warm, junky, rainy, just goes out. It's the root of it all. Granted, somebody who knows their limits too, but yeah, you want somebody who loves what they do. I can't emphasize that enough. And the finer things come shining through after that. Competitive sailing, it doesn't always bring the best things out in us. It's you know it well, Maciek, and I've seen it, and I understand that. That's what competition is, right? But at the same time, who's the best competitor? Is it sometimes the guy who's having the most fun? So, you want to breed that early on. Confidence is an important thing to have in that environment. And I can see how that can break, somebody who's not confident down. But, Simmer, as a brand, I think we have people on both tours, IWT and PWA. I think recently there was more of an emphasis on, a few riders who were on the PWA with the brand. We kind of, looked at that as what the value of that was to the brand, to us specifically, just based on being a Maui-based brand, image-wise and otherwise, the spiritual home of the brand. And so what did that tell us? That, what would it mean if one of our riders won the PWA title? You know what I mean? Like, does that then finally legitimize us as a brand? And, I took a long, hard look at that, and I just kind of went, we're kind of already had the hard work done. We've been around long enough that that part of it's done. You're not going to be further legitimized by anything. I mean, it was Paul Bryan won the O'Neill, and that was the first Simmer rider to win a Hokipa event. And that seemed like that was, something that Malta had been trying to do. Certainly Mark and myself had been trying to do. And Paul was the first to do it in 94, luckily. And, that was kind of like, okay, that's our big goal. We want to win a Hokipa, world title is something else. Granted, we want to be the best brand out there. We're going to prove it on the level of the highest stage and win a world title. But I also think that the general public sides with me on it all being about the sailing. And so, you can look at it that way, and we're all out there to have fun and make the most of that. So, competition is definitely important, but I don't think it all of a sudden legitimizes a brand because there's a world title under there. Just my 2 cents.
So you rather look at guys individually. It's not like you want to have, like you said, a team that we talked before, like back in the day. And okay, this is our PWA guy, this is our IWT guy, and this is our getting the clips guy, or this is our, go around in his van around Europe and promote guy.
I guess the current mode we're in right now is that we feel that there's a lot to be said just for visibility in all the markets, in all the sailing environments, and not an overemphasis of competition. So that has to be a part of it. And so what you say is the ideal. You want to have, strong representation in all those corners. It's just that if you overemphasize one of those corners, be it, the PWA or otherwise, then you're kind of like, I don't know, you might be spreading yourself too thin in other areas.
Yeah. I said guy. I was supposed to say guy or girl. I got some slack for saying guy, meaning, a person.
Well, we definitely had a very, very strong female contingent, recently. I miss Justinia and Sarah a lot on the team. But we've got Sarah Hilder, who's shredding up in the UK. There's going to be some up and coming other names and faces. It will cycle itself. That's probably one of the things I'm proudest most, I must say, about Simmer is the length of time on the team and my involvement aside, some really amazing people have ridden for this brand, over the years. And I would like to take this opportunity, not by name, just thank everybody out there who's ever been a part of the Simmer team, one way or the other, for riding with us. And, that's a long, long list of people. It's a good thing.
And a long list of stamps in your passport as well for those probably 30 years now. Do you have a list, like a list of your top 5 waves or your top 5 I want to go there places, or give me your top 5 waves?
Okay, but let's start with where I've been and where I want to go. Those are 2 different lists.
Yeah.
So how about we'll start with where I want to go.
Okay.
Okay, we'll start with that. I would really like to sail Cloudbreak.
Me too. Amazing. Looks amazing. Yeah. Looks so perfect.
Yeah. I'm a goofy foot surfer. I'm not going to say that, I am a strong, goofy port tack sailor, but that has helped me, and I'm ready to take that one on. I'd love to go. Jason Polikow, sign me up. All right. So, there's that. Right next door in New Caledonia, and this is something I learned a lot about from Sarah Hauser, was a place called Tenya. I want to sail that wave really badly too. I really want to go to New Caledonia and sail that spot. Let's go further over to West Oz in the northern desert there. I won't name names. Okay, you name names. Yes. So let's, say, what you're seeing here actually is that there's a lot of port tack spots on my list. I might have satisfied my desire for most of the down the line starboard wave sailing that's out there. But what you'll find is on the other list are those spots. So let me see here. Yeah, I'll keep it right there. I haven't been to Cape Town. I'd like to go to Cape Town sometime. That's a windsurfing hub, maybe a little bit more windsurfing than wave sailing until you get some of the other points happening. But yeah, throw me a little trip there. That'd be brilliant. And I think that's pretty. It's a good mix of northern and southern hemisphere.
It's all port tack. It's all port tack.
You got Cape Town port tack too. You're right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that and then Indo. And you could go to 9,000 Islands in Indo, but specifically on Java, there's a spot that has been uncorked that I'm super keen on.
Yeah. There's got to be some.
Probably another one to go with Traversa, camp out in the jungle for 2 weeks, collect rainwater and barely survive, and then score perfect waves. But yeah. That's, that I think the list of places to go, they're all port tack and for a reason. So there you go. That's that. And, the top 5 list of just, spots, you can sign me up at Cabo Verde for Alibaba, Punta Preta, and any of the other spots that are on that island and other islands. That's pretty much number 1, tied with Maui, I think. They go along great together. They are unfortunately far away from one another, and they require some intricate timing. And as I speak, actually, the Atlantic is firing up. So Josh, if you're listening, get your stuff ready because it's about to get good. And that doesn't make me shake in my boots. I think that's, kind of one of those things that between Maui and Cabo Verde, you're in great shape. I can't really say that I would necessarily want to put the Canaries on this list, but it is kind of unutilized for me. There's a lot more to the Canaries than just Pozo, obviously. So I need to go visit there as well. I think that's going to have to end up on the list. That's kind of an unutilized. And I haven't sailed Klitmiller yet for some odd reason. So I need to go there. And you tick off all the other boxes, but I mean, these are like dream destination type of questions. So, part of these are answers that I can't give you. They're secret spots. So, I'm just throwing the smoke screen on you with Klitmiller.
You're just giving me like a list of yeah. Like
That was a
making
bunch of crap right there, that answer.
Yeah. Whatever.
We'll get some sessions, Maciek. I know you're ready. We'll go off the record on that one.
Yeah. I'll let you slide there then.
Thank you. I dodged that one not so well.
Big waves then. Like it seems like I've been to Maui a month watching, and it seems like the bigger it is, the better you ride. And a lot of it, and I think a lot of it people don't see, is actually about, is it fair to say that the bigger it gets, the more it is about knowledge, experience, and seeing the lineup rather than just skill on the wave? Is that a fair assumption?
I think you're touching on part of it for me personally. Yes, the knowledge and experience, that's what you're relying on in the back of your mind. But I actually just really like sailing scared. And there's something about it, man. It's a mental hurdle. I'm in a really interesting place with big wave riding because of the fact that I have ridden really big waves up at Piahi and a couple times in Cape Verde as well. And really the only thing left to do there is to catch a bigger one. I'm not saying it's not fun, but the bar is pretty high here. And if I walked away, I would be fine. And I'm facing that right now, is that it's not worth it to die for some wall of water. And it's romanticized and celebrated and all of the above. And, that trophy already exists for me. So I'm really measured in terms of risk management when it comes to that. And I am in a different mindset than I was when I was 25 with it, for sure. The experience is really important because that keeps you from hesitating. Because if you let fear, like I say, I like sailing scared, but fear isn't something that you can't let it take over, huh? Like,
there's a healthy amount of fear, I think.
Correct. Because really, fear will make you hesitate. And if you hesitate, your worst fears will come true. And, that's what you have to avoid. And, it takes a lot of it. The experience is what will calm you down because you're not in unknown territory until you're in unknown territory. And that's really what I manage. It's an interesting process. Back when I lived down in Haiku Makai, down next to Hana Highway, on a day with big surf, the ground shakes there. You're next to Maliko Gulch. So you wake up at 5:30 in the morning and the ground...
People don't believe me, but I swear I felt it.
Yeah, no, listen, the ground shakes. There's been certain instances. I remember one swell in particular, some 40, 50 foot swell. And at a certain tide cycle, it must have been high tide. Legitimate, like 50 footers were slamming into the cliffs in Haiku. And one particular clasp occurred, which sounded like a bomb went off, literally, like just, it was just, my friend Joe calls me up, who lived, up Oili Road. And did you hear that? I'm like, yeah. And it was just like, the power of the ocean and the amount of energy. I mean, it's just, you surrender to the fact that you're doing anything. You're not taming anything. You're not conquering anything. You're going out there and you're getting a little piece of it. And you're getting amongst it for a little bit. You're getting out of there and you're going home and you're coming back.
Yeah, and there's something really beautiful about feeling so small and feeling that nature.
That's it. That kind of relates in a way to what I like to do up there in the Lofoten Islands, windsurfing in Tongstad Fjord with my friend Tommy. You're under this gigantic mountain that just puts you in that position. It's nice and stationary. It's not breaking down underneath. It's just sitting there. It's not a breaking, moving wall of water. It's this beautiful mountain. And I think that's kind of a balance of scale and perspective. Yeah, make yourself feel small and humble. Yeah. Very good thing to do.
I think what goes unwritten about big waves is like how tricky it gets in terms of wind. We're trying to windsurf it, and that day in 2018, I think it was in 2018, that the contest was there and they called it off because it was too big. And you guys were out there, and I was out in Kanaha getting destroyed. And it was about 7 knots of wind, 9 knots of wind. I think I heard, and you're probably going to confirm or deny that KP actually towed Jason Polakau into a wave because it was so light with his windsurfer.
Yeah, that could have gone a little better at that point. I think that in the lineup that day it was Derek Dorner driving Kai Lenny, and resorting to towing somebody in that situation, you want to do it really safely. There was maybe a situation where KP had chosen a wave that actually Patry McLaughlin was kiting on and forced Patry to kick out in a really bad spot. But anyway, yes, that is true. What happened?
And you were there.
You don't count that one, Maciek. That doesn't count. You didn't catch it with his own 2 hands. But Jason rode a really big wave and got towed in. And Jason needs no introduction. He's one of the best sailors out there. But in that particular instance, there was an assist. And that happened earlier on in the session because it hadn't gotten that windy. But I also think that Jason didn't have a big enough sail was the main problem. Neither did Kevin. I was on a 5.3, and Camille was on a 4.2, which is his version of a 5.3. And I remember vividly just, taking Camille on the ski out the back, just going, look, we'll put you in position, see if you can, get the apparent wind to catch the wave. Well, meanwhile, I'm watching Kai Lenny pull into these giant barrels. And the whole thing was just rather overwhelming, to be honest. The entire cliff of the WSL show lining up and the whole hoopla behind it. And just the moment itself, they had canceled a big wave event due to the conditions. And, things change over time, like a little 20-minute, half hour, 30-minute hour, and the whole place transformed. And that swell in particular was, well over 4.5 meter at 19, 20-second periods. There were huge troughs being formed. The swell period was allowing the shoaling of these waves. They would just grow and grow and grow. Definitely the biggest day I've ever sailed there. And when I made the conscious decision to rig, it had been after Camille had, shown that he could at least slog, which meant the ultimate game of cat and mouse that you have ever played, because you are only going to go for the bombs. There's nothing else to do. You got to be, right out there in the zone and play that. I caught 2 big waves. Rudy Castorina caught 2 huge waves, and Camille, as we know, got what many consider the biggest wave ridden out there. One of them for sure.
Yeah, and this is what I'm getting at, that the scary part is not actually riding the wave. The scary part is being in the right place at the right time, or not being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Like you say, you have to go for the bombs because the small ones or the mid ones, you're just going to get too far in, and then the big ones are going to eat you without even riding them. And I think it goes, nobody actually talks about it. This is, I don't know, for me, that was by far the scariest part of, and the following day that I was out there was half the size and a lot windier, a lot easier. Still, it was fucking scary, man. That positioning and all that is just scary,
Listen, that wave in particular draws on you, because what happens, Maciek, you get on, and the gross, it does nothing but just sits there and stands up on you. It's so super unique, and it's very, very, very dramatic. You've gotten a piece out there, which is, great to see. And especially coming, originating from your environment, the balance of contrasts there. But yeah, it's scary. To me, the fear and the managing the fear, you don't want to put yourself to be scared because, you're in over your head or anything. The preparation will allay the fear. I mean, you're still going to be in, you know, a state of, you know, enhanced alertness, so to speak. But like, okay, you know, you manage that part. For me, you know, going up there and or just sailing big waves in general, it's not like, I don't call it fun until I'm on my way home, you know, reflecting. Because when you're in the moment, you're managing the adrenaline. I mean, you've got me right now, man. I'm coming back to the problem that I had after that session, if I may, you know, share with you. I couldn't sleep for a while. I was a mess of adrenaline. I couldn't stop, like, amping out and just, you know, just thinking about just freeze frame moments of, like, you know, I might have looked behind me and watched the lip just, and this is going to be with me for the rest of my life. I'm going to be able to go to this place and like think about that moment and just get right back to how that felt. And it's rewarding and it's scary and it's memorable at the same time. You know, you make the decision to do it. I'm not some victim of my own, you know, distraction and find myself out there by accident. It's very deliberate. But that's the other part about it, is that, you know, I know exactly what I'm getting into. And, you know, luckily or not luckily, my first time I ever sailed Jaws, I nearly had a 2-wave hold down. I got destroyed. And that's on the Radical Attitude video, if you ever saw that one. That's a tape for your collection. That's one of the original ones you need to have. But yeah, and you know, you go.
Do you think? I always wonder.
It helps. It helps. It helps. 100%. It helps.
So many.
Because the threshold just expanded. You went through the worst possible case scenario. Now you go sail mast high Hokipa like it's nothing.
Yeah.
So there's.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know. Big wave. It's such a. I don't know. It's like I get chicken skin even talking about it. You know, it's.
I want to talk about what Traversa just did, and again, keep huge amounts of praise and credit to Thomas Traversa for his achievement at Nazare. And it's not the first time it's been sailed. Jason Polakawa went out there with double jet ski assist and did really well. But Thomas,
Jason's session was kind of onshore-y, and I don't know.
Was it
this
the
looked
same
a lot
situation?
better.
I mean, no. I really put them pretty closely together in terms of the chaos that Nazare really seems to be to me. I might really not be opting for that one. It looks pretty much like a little bit like of a category where the punishment outweighs the reward. But listen, you know, like I think with Nazare, it's more clear cut that you're going to get beat. At a place like Jaws, you know, you should be willing. Listen, if you're going to go sail big waves and you're looking at a lineup, the first thing you need to ask yourself is, are you willing to take the maximum amount of punishment that is being offered to you? You don't go out there thinking, I'm going to avoid trouble and I'm just going to go get a little one and come in, because that's when your worst case scenario hits you. And that's the law of it.
That's when you jibe out and you see the big cat feathering.
Right. That's like, oh, dun, 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 dun. And it's like clockwork, Maciek. That is what happens. It's not like maybe, maybe not. No, that's what happens every single time. And in the history of big wave riding with windsurfing, if I may dive into it a little bit, with the, you know, yes, a lot of this is, you know, Jaws related, but we had some historical rides back in '84. Fred Haywood, the Arnaud de Ronay shots, gigantic, who closed out, who'll keep a survival line, and, you know, it squirts out and makes it. And then Brett Lickle's Thanksgiving wave of '87, which I saw firsthand, was even bigger. That was a situation where that was the heaviest situation I've ever seen anybody, you know, deal with Hokipa, in terms of the hour and something that it took him to get out and then actually go and decide to turn around and catch a wave, which there were bigger ones coming in, but this is like washout 20-foot Hokipa. The chops going up the face were bigger than anything that happens in the gorge. I mean, it was just like this absolute chaos. And, you know, once we started sailing Jaws, you know, that bar kept getting pushed, you know, in all different directions. And that session that you spoke about was certainly, you know, one of those sessions that, you know, really hit a certain level. There's been, you know, Levi Cyber got this giant bomb back in 2006. That was a monumental one. I believe December 99 was this day that got really huge. Seager, but what I think's happened recently, and I'm going to give Thomas a lot of credit for this, is that the hunt for those waves is going worldwide. And what's this in Australia? Pedra Branca, Punta whatever. Maybe they don't want me to name it, but there's a place in Oz or Tasmania or something that is just it's incredible. And it might legitimately be the biggest wave in the world. We don't know. We're going to find out. And, windsurfing in the proper conditions is a really good way to ride big waves, because you have the ability to sniff out what those ground swells are doing a fair bit in advance and plot your line, to get through and successfully.
You can use that big canvas, right?
It's a big canvas. Granted, it's also a great way to put yourself in even more trouble. You can do this, and the false sense of security that windsurfing can give you, you have to balance that out with a healthy dose of surfing. You got to go paddle out and get pounded. You got to blow drops and just take a couple on the head every now and then, and pay your dues. So that's the big wave riding quest. There's less room for error, huh? Like you're dealing with forces and things where, the second chance, and sometimes it's not there. And meanwhile, a guy like Thomas Traversa, looks like he's got 9 lives, is just dancing around these like ridiculous waves and walls of water. And others, but specifically Thomas right now is like on a tear that
he goes out and he's like, I'm going to hit the lip. No matter how big it is, he just tries to go at it. And he's like, it's not really skill, it's just commitment. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like, it's so much skill, the timing, Jesus, it's insane, some of the stuff. But
you're looking at somebody who is at the top of his game, and is also very in tune with his equipment. And there's a third element of it's managing fear. He's not scared, and he sees things in a way that you would draw in your notebook. It's like cartoon stuff going on, and he's going for that. I think he sees in his own mind, like, this is possible. I can hook a turn under the lip going upside down and pull it. I've seen, he's a small guy who can ride small gear. And I saw this firsthand again with Sarah Hauser and this tiny equipment that she could ride, and the positions in the wave that, she's able to do. And Thomas does the same thing. He's able to put this small board that he's able to ride in radical positions and effectively just defy logic with the positioning. And that's where this game is now. It's not just like, oh, you rode a big wave, happy guy in the channel. No, you ripped a giant wave to pieces.
I love to see that.
The bar is really.
That was the only knock on big wave riding. Like, you guys are not, not going critical or whatever. Right. Now you see Brausinho under the lip,
right, on
a barreling wave at Jaws, and you see Thomas hitting it and just sheeting in for the biggest aerial you ever see or whatever. And
windsurfing's not going anywhere. It's at the forefront of what you can do, and it's part of the program, and that program, man, is expanding. But it seems to me that there are these root sports that you can base your program around, and windsurfing's one of them, surfing's the other one. And that really seems to me like where it's at, in a place like Maui or whatnot. But hopefully this can all come to normal. I miss sailing with a guy like Thomas, and I'm sure Thomas misses, coming here. This environment suits him really well. He's a great Hokipa sailor, great Jaws sailor, and, any of the other spots that you can come out here and sail. So, it's been an interesting time, no competition, but look what comes shining through these, landmark performances of people who are sending it, and really, really, understanding that we live in a time where this is instantaneous, that the mag's not coming out in 3 months. The clip's coming out tonight, and you're going to see it, and everybody's going to be talking about it. And, it's going to set the tone for whatever else, it's cool. And fans like this of the sport, like me and you, sit and watch and talk about it.
Exactly. What a life.
Life.
Let's settle a couple things here, because this has been around and it's never been kind of confirmed or never been really said. And you're a pretty good historian, so I'm going to pick on that a little bit.
All right.
Who actually windsurfed Jaws first? Because a lot of people claim it.
Yeah. I have your answer. All right. Okay. So the first people who windsurfed Jaws was Mark Pedersen, Dave Kalama, and Brett Lickle. And this happened in I'm tempted to say 1990 or something. And they sailed up from Hokipa. And it was not huge, but it was breaking. And apparently Hedgie or one of somebody's rig got stuck in the lip and went over the falls, but didn't break. And then they sailed home. That was the first session at Jaws. By definition, wasn't really Jaws. Maybe it was a little bit more like Gums, but Piahi. Okay, so fast forward to 1993, and the spring of 93 was very memorable, a very, very huge amount of big swells late in the season. And right around early April, there was a 2-day, warning level swell. And, this had been kind of, talked about. There was no real jet ski support in existence yet. It had been paddled maybe a few times, but not that successfully.
Zodiac support. They told themselves those Zodiacs.
Well, let's just break it down. There was no support. But the first day out of these 2 days, we did have our good friend Greg Aguera and Alex Aguera, who had a boat. And I was looking at Hokipa, coming close to closing out, and I was talking to Josh, and I was like, man, you guys should go up there. This is it. This is it's not going to be, too big where, Well, I kind of ended up sailing Hokipa for some reason, and Josh went up with Greg Aguera. Alex Aguera drove the boat, but I think his wife was pregnant and Carla was pregnant. So Alex didn't get to sail. He had to, be alive. So Greg goes out, Josh goes out. I think Greg found himself in trouble in the pit somehow. And Josh got a really famous wave, this barrel with his hand off the boom, just like, and there is this just, monolithic ride. That's in Radical Attitude also.
Shit.
And then the next day, we all sailed it. We walked down the cliff. It was me, Mark, Kalama, Rush, Alex, and Brett. And we just, Mark was the first one to launch off the boulders, barely made it, showed that it was possible. Next thing we know, Mark's in the pit getting, lifted by the set, and he's like tying his boom on, but he didn't sail far out enough, and all of a sudden he's getting lifted by the set. And we all sail it, and that's when I had my near 2-wave hold down. I got beat down. The plan was to sail down to Hokipa, and that worked for everybody but me. And I'd gotten a couple really nice waves. I had a great session, but I totally misjudged this one situation and ended up in the pit and had to, in front of like a 20-foot wave, pump and then dove off. What I remember the most was kind of like being underwater, and then, underwater you hear when it's the second wave breaking while you're underwater looming down on you. So it's a near 2-wave hold down situation, kind of a decision. Am I coming up for air or am I staying down? Air, come up, air, foam about this thick on the surface, throwing out, get your breath, nailed by an 18-foot ball of white water, and swam in with my board in pieces over the boulders. I was white as a ghost. Scariest thing ever. And that's it. That's the answer to your question. Those 3 sessions right there were, your inaugural days. So this is right around 90, 91. What were the disputes? Was somebody claiming something else? I'd like to hear it.
Yeah, there was in some beer conversations I've heard, a lot of different this was
Well,
the guy, or that was the guy, or
who-
I even heard I was the guy, from somebody, which I'm not gonna shame. So
Oh man. Okay. Well, I don't know. Yeah. That my version of that, I think, is the one. I don't remember it being any earlier than that. So.
yeah, we're not gonna. I'm not. Yeah, I think.
Okay. All right.
Quite a reliable source. Let's settle something else. You're
Okay.
like a world record speed drummer or something like that.
I like my medal.
But is there really like a world record for the amount of, hits you can do in a minute or something, or is that just blown out of proportion? You just drum really fast and that's it.
No, I drum really fast. That's it. But I did win the world's fastest drummer title. And this was an organized competition that took place at the NAMM trade show in LA. They have it in the third weekend in January. It's the entire music industry. And so they get they have a thing called a drumometer, which is a drum speedometer. And it measures the hits. You can't do a marching buzz roll. It has to be single hits. So 9:07 in 60 seconds, baby. Number one. And it's not a world record, but it won for the year. And I won like all the swag, dude. I won all these sticks and, signature sticks and heads and a drum kit. And yeah, bro, that was the real deal.
Sick. Yeah. There's some hand-eye coordination for you on that one.
Yeah, that's why I like the metal drumming is you're using your feet and your hands. A great way to stay busy with the left and the right side of your brain. But the speed drumming, it's not the only type of drumming I like. You can sit me down and I'd love to groove with,
The feet part throws me off. Like I can probably get a rhythm with my arms, but then once the feet come in, it's just like next level shit. So hard.
Half of the bands where my favorite drummers are from Poland.
Yeah, a lot of metal.
There's a lot of really good metal. They come up to Finland and play all the festivals, so I see them. Yeah, but I mean, it's almost like sport drumming at that level. And I consider myself a musician, so you draw the line, kind of like wind swell and ground swell. Like, are you a musician or are you a sport drummer?
Yeah.
Like to be more of a musician.
Let's settle one more thing. If PWA were to offer you a full-time commentating gig, with Ben Profit as our dream duo, would you take it?
I would take it. I would take it with the understanding that what you would find my dynamic with the awesome Ben Profit machine is really, the potential there with a motor mouth like myself was just two people running over each other. And Ben and I, in the same room is a lot for a lot of people. But we have a good time. We're on the same team. He's an awesome teammate and an awesome commentator. But, it's his gig. So if, you hire me full time and I'm not coming in here to establish anything, and I'm going to probably be a bit different than I would be at, the Aloha Classic where I'm kind of, holding the chair, so to speak, with Funk and a couple other guys, it would be a mellower version of myself up to a point, but I think it could work. The WSL pans into different people. It's not just one guy. Ben I've seen, do great work. At times it seems like it's a little much just being up there alone, that's a lot of work. I mean, if he manages to even convince himself to compete on top of that, it's absolutely overwhelming to sit there and call an event and then go out and seal heat. Believe me, it's overwhelming.
Yeah, I sat in for him to call his silt heat, and it was like the hardest thing ever. And then you listen back to it, and you're like, "Oh, I'm flat. I'm so flat." Like he puts both of you guys. You put so much emotion, somehow controlling it. Where you have to build the. I always wonder. Ask Ben if that's a conscious thing or not, and he says, "Like, yeah, it's kind of half conscious." And I think the dynamic would be amazing, like the Brit and the American, like you have, like when the Aloha Classic is on, you have two camps, you have like team Kai is amazing, and a team like bring back Ben because Kai is so American, and
right. No, I don't take that wrong. Like I think I'm at a stage right now where, you're going to get the real me, and it's not everybody, can handle that.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
and here's the other thing is that, again, it's Ben's gig. So like, I would never, ever want it to be a situation where, I took away from that. I only want to, build the brand. But right now, you see the hat I'm wearing here. And, I'm my allegiance right now is with the IWT, based on the fact that, we're going to get off the ground with a really big tour too. So, maybe we just started a big bidding war. I don't know. But, the dynamic, listen, it's not like I can't call a PWA event. We're like I said, trying to work together here. So that's, I think, what the forces at play would be is really, I would be coming in as kind of the IWT guy and Ben's the PWA guy. And if the PWA wants to add me to their roster, well, we're open for negotiation. It's November. It's that time of year, man. We're talking about next year already, right? Yeah. No, I could be that guy. Like, I remember, I won't name names, but like, there was a guy who was once sponsored by like 2 clothing companies at the same time and had both logos on his board. And then like the dudes from the company came to the beach and like, hey, you're sponsoring. Oh no, hey, you're a spon. Whoa, what's going on? Like this triangle, conflict happened.
That's amazing. You have to spill the beans who that was, dude. Amazing.
Listen, whoever that was collected 2 paychecks for a little while, and then he collected no paychecks
for a longer while. Yeah.
Anyway, you got to be streetwise in this game. I'll elaborate. I mean, like, depending on who you're riding for, that's the gear you're slinging, right? You sling gear. Don't tell me you don't sling. You sling in gear. If you're a pro windsurfer, you're slinging gear. So you got to ride for a brand that people want the gear. You got a bunch of gear for sale that nobody wants, then you don't got nothing, man. Just my 2 cents.
Definitely. Like you said, you launched that little used gear corporation of yours you mentioned.
Yeah. Oh, it's thriving, believe me. We could start the bidding war for this if you want.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, not in the position.
What are you going to do if you buy it, Maciek? You're going to paint it white and just put different logos on it.
Let's not go there.
I can go there. I think people have been doing it with our boards. I'm just kidding. We don't want to go there. We're keeping this. Has been remarkably cordial, but it's good. I think you touched on that one thing. There are different factions in there of people, who like maybe that whole Euros versus the Hawaiians isn't alive, but maybe it's kind of gotten compartmentalized into more of like countries. Because I'm sure like. Listen, man, if you're in a heat with a bunch of, Frenchies or Germans, it kind of gets that way, right? They're going to, it's not like teamwork in a slalom heat. Well, or is there? Do you guys block like that based on countries?
There's claims, like in the 2016 title race, there was a big claim that the 0.7 team was blocking Pierre, and whatever. But
that's going to affect my betting. When you talk about betting, then you can start fixing races. You pay off a couple guys to block dudes, and then, hey.
You got to get the insight. You got to get the insight. Bookie. Maybe you should become the prime windsurfing bookie,
Yeah, I could do that. Probably, have my little undercoat there.
Hustle guys into betting big on something ridiculous or whatever,
What do you mean? I already do.
Okay, we have this section that we go to at the end.
All right.
Which was supposed to be quickfire questions when I kind of designed it, but it ended.
Oh, watch out with me, dude! I'm gonna spend an hour on each one.
It ended up being very, very slow fire. So number 1, what are your pet peeves?
Pet peeves. Talking behind people's back. Gossip, little small town frivolity. You can't say something to my face, but you can talk behind my back. Happens a lot on this island.
Definitely. How many times a day do you pee or wet? Shit, that doesn't. Actually, it does.
Well, how many times a day do I pee in my wetsuit? Were you gonna say?
Yeah.
Well, up in Norway, quite a lot. 2 times. Always before a duck dive, though.
Doesn't run up. Then you flash it out.
No. I use old wetsuits. There's holes everywhere.
Yeah. So you're the rubber, not the stretching you. You like the rubber ones. Yeah. What is your guilty pleasure?
My guilty pleasure? Well, I'll tell you, I have this chocolate mousse that I buy at Mana Foods that I'm not always allowed to, it's not always, but I have it now. And like, even this time of day, early in the morning, like sometimes I reach for it and I really shouldn't do that.
Amazing.
Mana's chocolate mousse is a downfall for me. I get away from that as quickly as possible.
The next one is fully American sports debate thing. Like your top 5 windsurfers of all time.
Top 5 windsurfers of all time. Wow, that's, if I got to choose 5, I'm going to go. Okay, I'm going to count Mark and Josh Angulo as the same guy, even though it's not. But that just for the sake of, you're going to give me 6 because they're both on that list.
The Angulo, okay. Let's call him.
Paul Bryan. Levi Siver. I'll throw in room for a Traversa, or I'm really, really into my Hokipa sailors. They're there, but things have changed. A lot of good sailors, man. Like, I really I admired somebody with the fluidity and new school Christmas of a Mark Paré. That's definitely somebody who I am amazed by his level. He kind of fits into a category, Mark does, that there's a couple other guys I would talk to you about that. And I think the guy that I'm going to actually replace Mark with is Alessio Stilrick as my last one. He's having a huge year, flying around, ripping like a madman in Pozo, and healthy for the first time in ages. And what I'll say about Alessio is that what I see in what our gear has done for him at Simmer is so self-evident, in that it's not just the gear, it's Alessio, but the combination, that's undeniable. It's been like one of those perfect symbiotic relationships that met right in the middle, and then you had your perfect performance. That list could go on and on, but we'll cut it short there. The amount of ripping going on in that list is just like what I've seen over the years sailing Hokipa with these guys, and elsewhere. The sessions I've had with Josh in Cabo Verde and what I've seen him do. Oh man.
Yeah.
What I saw.
That answers the whether you're kind of a contest guy. You don't have Dunkerbeck in there. You don't have. Yeah.
I'm true to my roots, and really, I think at the end of the day, we all remember certain individual moments and performances more than we remember contest results. Granted, some of those performances occurred during contests, and there was a time where contests brought out the best in everybody, and that's what we're really trying to do with competition, huh? We want that to be the best performances. Sometimes it is, and a lot of the times it's not. A lot of the times you're sailing a contest differently than you are free sailing.
Yeah.
So you're right. All of those really mentioned were typically, more free sailers for the most part, with a few competitive machines mixed in.
I'll throw you an extra one here, since you're a team manager. You get limitless budget, and you choose 5 guys. Your perfect team.
Wow.
Like this day and age.
Well, we're going to cover all the bases, huh? You know, I would sign Balls Mueller because he's going to cover the alien stuff and throw it into this spectrum where he's in his own little, corner. But we're just going to, throw a little gasoline on his fire and just watch it go. Some of the most spectacular sailing being done is by him right now, on foil or otherwise. No question. Then we're going to need to go to some. Well, this is a good question now. I'm starting to think competition, but then all of a sudden I stopped thinking competition. No, we're going to need a world title out of that budget. We're going to need a world title out of that budget. We need one. Well, Alessio's our guy. We stick with Stillrick for the title. Based on what the current PWA tour is, we're going to need to whip Alessio into shape a little bit, on starboard tack. He's a great all-around sailor, but, his forte is out there in port, which, with the PWA tour, you never know. Could just be, Zilt and Pozo again if we're not careful. So we'll put substantial resources into making Alessio, a full-time contender. And that's probably, to me, maybe you don't want to spread it any more thin there. But, it depends a little bit. We're going to have a strong presence in Scandinavia. We kind of already do with Marcus Rydberg and Gustav Hagström, probably keep that going. Noam, high hopes for him and so much potential that, he's on this list too. He's going to be, the future star of that. And then we're going to need to go find a heavy hitting, ripping, up and coming female to round that out. Can't just be a bunch of dudes.
Yeah. Sausage fest. Yeah. And
I don't know where I go with that because, what we saw when we had Sarah and Justinho was, a perfect mix of, image and balance and ability and marketability and visibility. And so, one was a little more competition based, one was a little bit freesailing Hokipa based. And, for the Simmer brand, I kind of, might err towards the side of a Hokipa sailor, wave sailor specialist again, over the competitive machine need just for visual and just, consistent output of maybe slightly more spectacular imagery. I don't mean to put the PWA down, but if you spend 3 months a year at Pozo, you might not be serving your purpose overall. You're getting good at Pozo, but there's a world of sailing out there that you're not, covering. And something like Pozo, and even something like Hokipa, you need to specifically dedicate to it. It's not just something that you can show up and sail well, from day one. You have to start, acclimating to it. That's a hard one. But there are a lot of really talented up and coming female riders right now, which is great to see. There's a lot of talent out there. The dream team.
The dream team.
I wouldn't mind signing you, Maciek. Actually, you look like somebody, like I wouldn't mind putting on the team. I'll be honest, you're an all-around threat in everything you do. You're an underrated wave sailor. You're gnarly, dude. You do it for the love of sailing too. That's going to be the prerequisite for anybody.
Wave sailing for sure, mate. I spend all my savings just traveling, chasing waves rather than
Hey, well, I'll be devil's advocate. You can try a rig if you want. Maybe this is the start of a beautiful relationship. I don't know. But you look good, dude. And, hats off to you because that's, you're purveying this in the right way as well. You're certainly somebody that any team captain would look at very seriously.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So before me, it was basically guys you already sponsor. So that's like your... like how you say, like, yeah, just living by what you represent, I guess. I gave you all the money in the world and you came up with Simmer guys. So I guess
well, there's something that a term I've coined with my marketing director Peter Ange, who I've worked with very closely here for close to 15 years now, and it's, are you Simmer material? And that has a lot to do with things, and some people are and some people aren't. And you recognize it quickly. And, the love of windsurfing has to do with the root of it all here at our brand. And, that pervades into a lot of really, really positive attributes later on when you realize you're doing it for the right reasons. You see, windsurfing back in that 80s era I was describing, People were making too much money. There were guys who were doing it for the money, not for the love of the sport. Literally. And maybe even to this day, though, I have a hard time believing that you would, make so much money that you're only doing it for the money nowadays. But back then, man.
But these guys, they don't last, So,
no, they don't. They don't last. Hello. No way. Well, of course not.
Yeah.
You follow the money around to 5 different sponsors, and in 10 years, you look at an old magazine and you don't even recognize yourself.
Yeah.
You just switch sponsors all the time. People should be careful about that.
Yeah. Most underrated windsurfer of all time.
Pat Redmond, West Australian sailor, sails Margaret River. I think he might be a kiter now, so maybe this is one of them. But I went to Margaret's in '99 and kind of anonymously showed up. I didn't, I knew I was in for something. That's a heavy spot.
Yes.
And what you do at Margaret's when you wave sail it, if you I'm going to go down the line and outrun the section, no, you blew the whole wave. You have to come from out of nowhere and bottom turn under that lip, under the cornice, much like we see the greats do, and get under the lip and throw. And I watched him, over the course of a couple of weeks, and I realized, I'm watching something here that's a little bit beyond reality. It's somebody who's so in tune with the break and his gear and his, way of riding it. But, he was a humble character. He showed up in this beat up Holden, rusted, barely held on. It wasn't a pro sailor, it was a ripper. But man, that serves to me as an underrated sailor. And there are many, many others. I think that if you get to the point where you would be considered underrated and you have the skills to be considered underrated, generally speaking, you've also then started building up yourself a little bit. So you're not underrated because, you're doing it. But another guy I'm going to mention, Luke Siver, big time. And that's, our backyard underrated guy right now because Luke does ridiculous stuff. And Luke sails at his own, pace for his own pleasure, his own, schedule. And it's apparent that he'll turn it on when he wants to. He gets interested. He's going to start hitting big sections. But if not, he's out there going to go flip around with this inverted, weird, I can't even call it cheese roll because it's not, but he just does this ridiculous jump that's looks like he could do it in his sleep.
Yeah,
it's very relaxing. And it's somebody who's totally doing it for the love of it. And, being the brother of Levi Siver, obviously you'd be like, Luke, when Levi and Luke were coming up, was kind of the gnarlier sailor for a little while there in terms of, being older and filled into his body type and, how big he would go. And then you watch a little brotherly competitiveness between the two. But Luke was the guy who didn't go for the, big name sponsorships and the full blown career. And, therefore didn't receive all the accolades that he might have had he gone down that route. But what he earned in terms of local street cred and respect from, his friends, that's worth almost more sometimes.
Yeah. Just to give my 2 cents also on Margaret River, I think maybe I was pretty bad back then also, but so hard to time that wave perfectly. And after 5 days of being there, I had no rigs left. And every time you break and you swim into the river mouth, you owe the boys a carton of beer. So after 2 weeks, I had no rigs and no money left because the beer was so freaking expensive as well. And I was barely, I was, I think, 19 or something.
Classic, dude. Chris Partain and the boys are cleaning up on you. That's too good. Luckily, I didn't have any of those swims. I do remember once that on a slightly smaller day, I was up sailing by the surgeon's table, and aptly named because that's where you were coming in on. And Partain took me aside and said, "Mate, if it was 2 feet bigger, man, this place would knock your block off properly, mate. Don't go up there with your little back loops." I'd love to go back.
Sick place.
But one of my mentors, Rich Myers, and also a longtime Simmer alumni, Rich Myers, lives in Dunsborough. And I went and stayed with him 20 years ago. And I really need to get back there. He has it mapped out. It looks like he'd probably still be sailing too. So cheers to the whole WA crew. There's a good little simmer presence there as well. We're working with some really good people there. So cheers to you all.
One spot you'd have to sail every day for the rest of your life, but you really have to go every single day.
I have to go every single day.
Yeah.
You know, probably the spot that I've sailed more than anywhere else, it's Ho'okipa. And I say that because of all the different moods it has. You know, I could make something up and say, I want to sail Punta Preta every day, and then, you know, play God and act like it's 6 feet and going 400 meters every day. And if it was, that would be my answer, but it's not. And you know, like, that's what makes it special. And some of these other places, even on Maui, like going to the west side when it gets good, is that it doesn't happen all the time. It's the significance of these confluence of events that have to happen for it to happen. And it doesn't always happen. So Ho'okipa, you know, one form or another, you know, if I'm on a deserted island fishing and eating coconuts for the rest of my life, yeah, give me Ho'okipa, because I know it's going to have a lot of different looks. And it's probably going to have, you know, a lot of days.
I think this is also not a little unwritten, goes a little unwritten. Like Ho'okipa can be side on, like, it can be straight offshore, like freight train type, where you just, you know, fly off a big section and you have all the power in the sail and whatever. It can be like side on, and you're wondering what the hell am I doing on a mast high wave when it's so onshore, you know? And yeah.
Right. For being everything and all of the above, Ho'okipa has all these different looks. And even for surfing, you know, maybe somebody from the North Shore of Oahu would come to Ho'okipa and look at the best day of the year and laugh and drive away. The fact is that if you can surf Ho'okipa well as a surfer, it prepares you for a lot of the other waves in the world because of its shifty nature, the amount of paddling that you need to do. A lot of these things will whip you into shape. It was something I took for granted for a while, actually, when I was growing up here, that, you know, the punishment, I was just, you know, like used to taking punishment. And that's an important thing to have as on your resumes. Like, you know, you can get pounded and handle. That's part of
surfing. It too much hustle for not enough reward.
Sure.
You know,
sure. I mean, the environment here right now, we're in a golden era. You know, it's a tight knit crew of people. We're doing a lot of sailing. You know, like I said, it's a community. You know, people, I'm really grateful to, you know, be accepted and be a part of it. At the same time, you know, like we know what it's like in normal times, and when the photo shoots come and when the contests come, and you know what that does. And I think it's just it's a reminder as to, you know, what it's part of the necessary elements of what, you know, drives the machine is competition and photo shoots and whatnot. And I think it's been a good thing to step back from and realize that, you know, give it some breathing room. Ho'okipa is going to need some breathing room. It's had some breathing room. These last 9 months, it's been lots of breathing room. And I think that, you know, people are hoping and wanting it to get back to normal to a degree, but savoring the moment as the same. Because, you know, when the photo shoots descend and this contest descends, it is kind of BS for the local people here. And it is, you know, like, it's not like it was in '88 when you couldn't even see the beach because of all the slalom rigs. But, you know, I feel like...
No, now you guys have it good for sure for the last... whatever it was.
What I'm trying to say is I'm trying to, you know, sit here and, you know, dangle it like, I'm enjoying, you know, there's a crisis going on in the world. But at the same time, you know, for me to be able to, you know, take advantage of, first of all, the situation I'm in and come here and, you know, definitely continue, you know, to promote the brand and work on some, you know, prototypes and whatnot, you know, almost in a way like we had our Aloha Classic last week. There are these like really good days. I'm looking at all the guys I've sailed heats with over the years. We're out there sailing together. It was like we were saying to each other, okay, this is the Aloha, you know, it happened. And we didn't have a winner. We all won, basically.
Yeah.
And here's to hoping that things just, you know, come back to a point where we're doing this next year and you're sailing your heats and maybe me and Ben are up there yapping about it and, you know, that whatever it takes. I'm pretty open-minded.
But definitely a period like this, you step back and, you know, even what we're doing now, probably if we had a full-on tour, I wouldn't be doing it, you know, because, you know, just do different things and it's fun. It's fun for sure. Take whatever is given to us, you know, somehow. And
I think it's ultimately been a really healthy thing. You know, I'll add that, you know, like the fact that we weren't doing our photo shoots last April to release next year's gear in July things, certain brands have, stayed that course, but we at Simmer have definitely stepped into releasing our gear closer to the end of the year and dialing that part of the calendar in, basically, deliberately to normalize this process and get things a little bit more shelf life. I'm sure, the people selling the gear in the shops appreciate that and want it to be a situation where, we're able to, promote the current product instead of just always switching over. And I understand, the factory perspective or whatever makes this work as well. But that's been really refreshing too.
Yeah, it was kind of earlier and earlier and earlier. And I was like, fuck, we're going to reach a point where we're actually going to kind of skip a year. Like we're going to, you know what I mean? Yeah. We're going to launch the
I agree.
2022 gear in January of 2021. And then it's going to end up being 21 gear. And where I just,
sure.
Actually, you know what I mean? It's crazy.
Yeah. If it becomes this necessity that the newer is better, that's, one thing. You see companies like Ezzy who don't look at it that way. They just update their models and give it, slightly different alterations. Simmer, I think we're taking a look at the board line a little bit more openly in terms of not falling into that wheel and maybe, updating. You give us some time to come up with something better. No, don't just come up with something new for the sake of it being new. No, let's work on this and make it better. It takes time. Maybe like once every 2-3 years, you update your boards and you come up with something that is,
like a new model, like cars or whatever,
Right. But I mean, yeah, it's funny. Like, it's the auto industry's fault. They're the ones who always come up with this something new every year. And now windsurfing has to do it, right? Like,
yeah.
No,
but at the same time, like if Fanatic has all the 21 boards available in Europe already, if you're not doing it, you're sort of falling behind in a way.
It depends what brand you are. If you're a brand like Simmer Style that has a dedicated following that's been using the gear for over 30 years, and we have people like people with tattoos on their arm, man. Like we got a dedicated clientele, and they're not going to wait forever, no. But they're also not going to buy something just because it came out and it's new. And I also, we might not have that clientele that keeps the sale for 8 years either. Like, some brands you see like, oh, we make the toughest sale out there. It'll last you forever. And it's like, okay, well, you gotta have that, who brags about, I've had this sale for 8 years, not many people. I mean, it's the turnover is important. And it's important to understand that, gear will improve, but it's also just the same fact that nothing feels better than a brand new sale, right? So there's that too.
Unpacking new boards is like the best feeling ever.
Yeah, it is. And we're the lucky ones, we get to do that. So anybody can live the dream, and everything has a price. And I think that, what we have right now is the ability to pick and choose the right gear for the right environment. And, as a fan of the sport, once again, it's thrilling to see that diversity, though we're all after the same thing. Ultimately, it's this level of performance that enhances our lives and gives us, more reasons to go out there, whether that's windsurfing itself as a sport or branching out into the other things that you can do as well. I think that, back to Kai Lenny, we're doing a lot of different things at a really high level, and the gear is part of it, and not defining yourself into any particular category, but having your core sports anchored in. That's where it's all about. I mean, I don't, turning 50 for me is going to be a trip, but like, I feel like now's the best time, because it's like, the enjoyment just keeps getting more and more. And that's a really good thing to be able to say.
It's so sick to interview guys like yourself or Robbie Nash. Like, Robbie's well over 50 and he has so much stoke. I'm like, shit, so I can be that stoked for another 30 years?
You can, and just be realistic and take good care of yourself. Don't destroy your body trying like stupid stuff.
Like, I do. Yeah.
Well, you got to try. I mean, you're definitely, out there to prove yourself, but prove yourself over time, not just over one session.
Yeah. Worst or funniest check-in story?
Check-in story.
Yeah.
You're talking to a drummer and a windsurfer. Okay. Funniest check-in story, or one of them anyway. I've got a really two good ones. Well, the first one's just at one point I was going to California for the summer, and I was packing my drum kit and my sailing gear. And I had 13 pieces. And somehow within it all, the travel agent told me, yeah, your ticket's at the desk. Well, I'm like, okay, cool. Well, she meant the desk at her travel agency, not the desk at the airport. So I had shown up with like 13 pieces drum set, windsurfing gear. And I'm like, hey, brah, you got my ticket by the desk. And he's like, no more about it. I mean, I'm with my desk. Anyway, so I didn't have my ticket. This is like paper ticket time. Like, had to do the whole thing over again the next night. Pales in comparison to some of the stories that I've heard. But another good one was recently, actually, this trip right now from Helsinki to Maui. I had this board in a bag with a couple sails. I had a 30-kilo bag. Okay, I had my layover in San Francisco. Trip didn't start too well. I'm in Helsinki with Lufthansa, haggling a little bit, like, can I check this into Maui or what? And she said, no, you got it in San Francisco, like, oh. I'm like, okay, they obviously don't know who they're dealing with here. Like, I'm just gonna, I first of all knew the forecast. There was no wind for like 8 days. So I was like, I don't really need this gear. In the back of my mind, I was like, I don't need this stuff yet. So I'm like, okay, I don't know. They charged me like, pretty high for one bag. I got my gold, my silver card. And it's not doing me anything. And it's so, like, check through to San Fran. Fine. Okay, well, I get to San Fran and I've got, something of an 18-hour layover to do, a lot of things other than wait in an airport for my bag. Well, I thought it out. I had a 50-minute connection in Frankfurt going over. So I'm like, I'm going to play the old missing bag trick. So I get to San Fran and, I'm like, I don't really feel like carrying this thing around, and I am going to just leave. Okay, so I get my other bags, I leave, I go, have dinner with my folks outside, safe distance, first time I'd seen them in 9 months. Go to my hotel room because I wasn't staying with my folks, and I'm being extra cautious, whatever. Get ready, leave the bag. I'm like, I didn't even know if it made it or not. I just like left it. Anyway, so like, then the next day I'm flying to Maui, and I guess I'll go look for my bag now, over in customs. Okay. Well, I get this kind of like half-hearted response from the guys in customs who were like, just fly to Maui and, no big deal. I'm like, yeah, okay, no problem. So anyway, like, got on the phone with United and Lufthansa were just basically like, yeah, I need my bag now. And, 4 or 5 days later, it came. Perfect. That's my story. It was great. Yeah. Convenient story. No bad ending, nothing. Just let the system work for you. Don't worry about things. They got you.
I've been always super tempted to do that because I heard like there's guys that just never pick up their bags and let claim the missing bag and then let the airline or whoever drive it to them, like even at your home airport. But I just never have the balls to do it because what if they lose my freaking boom bag with all my fins and all my foils or whatever, It
was a little bit of a gamble. That's my favorite board right there. And, that didn't necessarily wasn't a grade, but, panned out and 2/3 of the way there is pretty good, but I mean, the baggage stories are left and right. But I mean, you had KP on here not that long ago, right? Did he tell you the multiple bag tag story?
The one that they manufactured the tags, like they printed out the tags. Yeah.
Did he tell you that? That is the most legendary story of all time. I mean, we're talking about the FBI getting on you and stuff.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah,
that's amazing.
But he played it down. The story grew to a point where everybody thought he's like banned for life from American Airlines, and he had to pay like. And he had FBI on his ass and whatever, and he played it down. He says like, I got a couple phone calls, I got my lawyer involved, I paid like $5,000 and it was over with, So, well, for him back then, $5,000 was like lunch money.
Yeah, but the point being that like, what was worse, paying the actual fee and going through all that? No, that's the story though. You start printing bag tags, you're ahead of the game. I always respected that one immensely.
Yeah.
It could have lasted. Should have lasted forever. Hey, Kevin, check in my bag for me.
Yeah. It's like, so yeah, you're making bank, but you still have that windsurfer mentality of like, let's save, $50 a bag here, and let's print.
Or if it was just quicker, give them some credit. It was probably just quicker to tag them and not wait in line and deal with it. Go have a coffee or something.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Your worst competitor from your competing days?
Oh, meaning like who I did the least well against?
Or you hated to compete against,
Yeah, there were some healthy rivalries. I never beat Polakau. I had some critical heats. The 91 O'Neill, I had gotten to the semis and I lost to Polakau, and I think he had a pretty easy final against somebody I forgot who, but like 0 for 4, and in critical spots. A couple times close heats, but most of the time, for some reason, like complete meltdowns, like my boom would fall off or some crap like that. But yeah, that's, I won't even call him a nemesis. I'm just too fond of the guy and look up to him way too much to ever call him, a rival or anything. But I mean, in terms of a win-loss record, that's, maybe one I would have liked to have gotten a couple on there, obviously. But, it's Jason Polakau, so, that's how it is. And aside from that, I've kept it real clean. And I guess that happens too when you win a lot of your heats. But yeah, I can't say that there's been a thorn in my side that I, despised to the point where I had to crush him in a heat. It's always, I've always gone about anything like that more with the Aloha style of like, hey, the water's really nice. Good luck. Just say something bland and go out there and destroy them. No matter who you are. Yeah, but what? One thing I was about to do at one point, I might bring this back. This is back when I had my shark mouth boards. This is, my military graphic that really caught on. I used to get 5 times as much coverage because of these boards, and it just looked like a shark jumping out of the water. I wasn't doing anything. It was just the board. But anyway, so what I was thinking was like, I would start putting the flags of the countries of the competitors that I beat on the board. Like, the ace kill, like, a couple Aussies, there's a couple Japanese and some Frenchies. And sure, yeah, that looked good.
And having watched the last couple Aloha Classics, I would say like in those, Hokipa was your worst competitor. I have to say, like, something like when you look out of, like when you're out of sync with the place, it can be like your worst, like your worst opponent, it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean that's you're only competing against yourself ultimately.
Yeah.
And in Hokipa's case, you're directly tangling with Hokipa.
And it was crazy to see for me because I saw you sailing there every day and just going miles out and picking really good waves every single time, and then I watched the heat and I'm like, shit, he can be out of sync too, So,
yeah, it happens to anybody. I don't envy Duncan Coombs' position of having to send out some of these heats that he does sometimes, and forcing it through. And it was an interesting situation last year when, we actually halted competition with Brasinho in contention for a title based on the conditions, midway through the double round. That'll be something that, certain people will question and certain people will understand. And what ends up being, you see contests at Zilt that go left and right and back and forth in terms of, like, that's just the reality of a place like Zilt. It's going to be good. It's going to turn on. It's going to turn off. And then all of a sudden you've had good conditions and you get to the final and
well, it's never good. It's contestable. It can be contestable.
Contestable. And that's the fine line here is what's contestable and what's not.
Yeah.
And what ends up being that situation. I mean, I remember Brasinho certainly looking at it one way last year where it was like, okay, well, I can win the title if they just let me sail my heat.
Yeah.
And, or a certain sailor doesn't. And, there was Koster, which I remember vividly, earning his title based on winning at Hokipa. And, I have to say that, had that not occurred, it would have been all for naught. But the fact that, you threw Koster in the pressure cooker and made him win a heat or two or, whatever it was, that was massive. And that legitimized Koster to me. And not that he needed to legitimize, but it did. And it was something that, you know, you took it outside of his normal realm of domination, which was Pozo and some of these other spots.
Yeah, if you Googled or if you looked it up in the dictionary, like Euro Portuck jumper, you know, you guys, as in the Hawaiian groundswell mafia, you know, you kind of took him as a portray of that, you know, and like make him earn it here, you know.
Right. Well, sure, but I mean, look at some of the years, you know, on tour that he got titles in. You tell me what tack that was involving.
Yeah, sure.
You know, like there were port tack titles happening.
Yeah, sure.
And you know, that's just as illegitimate as any Hokipa world title that's only based at Hokipa. The balance is the most important part, and that's my point behind all of that. It's like we got a world out there, Maciek, that, like, you know, like there's a lot of good spots, and you know, like there's the temptation to say, oh, this place is awesome, let's have a contest. Okay, well, that's not always the case. I mean, if you want to use Cabo Verde as an example, and a very good example, really, of a standard that got set back in 2007 when they had that monumental event. And what happened there was, you know, era-defining shifts were happening. I mean, Kali and his twin fin, the approach that he was taking to Punta Preta at the time, able to ride smaller gear in a tighter than on the other side of the draw is Josh Angulo. You know, he's got his single fin, he's got his big sail, he's power surfing it, big aerials, you know, connecting the dots, local knowledge. Well, anyway, the point being, like, this contest, like, all of a sudden was just like, this is the best thing ever, oh my God. Well, you know, they had a few other events there, but the standard had gotten set too high. You know, all the preparation and prayer going on to make that event happen on Josh's behalf as organizer and competitor. Yeah. But I mean, like, the fact that the conditions that happened for those events, I mean, you would be led to believe that it's always like that, and it's not. And so it's super hard to, you know, justify, you know, closing down Punta Preta for a specific period of time and expecting it to happen, though, you know, they knew what they were doing in the right time of year. But what had happened was, you know, by the time, you know, the fourth year rolled around and it ended up happening in some odd time of the year, like November or something, and it wasn't the right time of year. Everybody brought gear. Everybody brought gear for 2007. There was this heat against Vogt and Josh that they reran like 10 times. Josh had a 105 liter board, a 6'2", and a team of people shuffling him in and out of the shore break at Coral Jewel, and he was sailing effectively, competitively enough. No one else had the gear he had. He had Vogt on a 5.0 and an 80 liter board, granted sinking to his ankles because there's nothing else you can do on that equipment there. But Josh was linking turns and connecting it. But Duncan wouldn't count the round because why? Because it wasn't contestable. It's like, no, you know, sometimes you have to just swallow the bitter pill and realize that some people are, like, completely prepared for it. But, you know, really, that wasn't the heat that broke the camel's back. Is when Flo Zhang broke his ankle in the shore break coming back in some crevice, and it was like, oh no, this has gone too far, and you can't hold condition, you know, can't hold heats in this. You can't do it based on that structure. So, I mean, Cabo Verde will always exist as this holy grail potential, which it always has, but it's as elusive as it gets. Yeah. And trust me, from someone who goes there and, you know, I live in Finland, you know, and go there when it's good, because I can make my decision to go there the night before. And like I said, I've got my gear waiting for me there for the most part. I bring a couple sails, a boom, and a mast. I'm ready to go. And, you know, that's the kind of place it is. You'd be led to the contrast of being like Maui with quantity over quality. Sometimes you get both. Whenever Cabo Verde is good, it's best ever quality.
Yeah, that 07 contest, I think many people will agree, is the best contest of all time. You know, it's like insane, absolutely insane.
Yeah, it was historical.
Yeah, you get $1 million in cash, and you need to spend it in 24 hours. What do you get?
Okay. Let's buy a house here on Maui, kind of on a fixer-upper. We'll knock that one in. We'll get a Tacoma, store it in storage. We'll have kind of like a part-time Maui house.
Yeah, you can buy about maybe a 50 square meter house for $1 million there. Definitely not a
no. I would just buy land.
Yeah.
I'm not going to buy a house. I'm going to buy land. I'm going to buy raw land, and I'm going to, long-term project. And that'll be a good springboard for, coming and going. It'll be good for my boys to kind of understand what getting your fingernails dirty means and building something yourself. At that point, I think I would probably buy a little property in Cape Verde. Probably still be able to, in this moment, be able to get something there. So yeah, I'd probably try and tie up a couple properties and maybe reinvest a little bit in simmer gear. Maybe come out with a pro model with a really hot construction and pay for it myself so that I get all the profit.
That's a good one.
Strong arm the guys and be like, look, I paid for it. You just put your logo on it. I own, come on, this is me, man. And make it all about me. And then, so.
Yeah, I love
it. Just because of the money. Look what started happening. I got some money and I changed. I was like a real person before it all happened, and now I got the money, and it's all changed for the worse. It's all about me now and my money. You got a lot of people on Maui, especially like that, who think that the money does the talking and that they can do whatever they want because they have money, and it's not like that. It just ain't like that.
Yeah, we got a nice little rant for the end. Last but not least.
Hey, but just $1 million? Can't you give me a little more?
Yeah, I know it doesn't.
Can't you hit me with 100 million so I can buy my Gulfstream G5 and so I can fly? I'll never miss another swell anywhere on the planet.
Man, 100 mil for that jet is not that much. You need the maintenance. What does it cost? It costs like a couple mil, yeah. And then you need the maintenance. You need the fuel.
You can get a G550 for like 20 million used. Learn a little bit about aircraft maintenance, I guess.
Yeah. Then you need to store it. You need the pilot. You're not gonna fly yourself.
Yeah. I'm gonna be like John Travolta, dude. I'm gonna have my own airport. So rad, dude. The guy's got his own airplanes. It's like, let's go somewhere. Gone. Like I said, could you imagine, the scope of things? You could just be on it, bro. 7,000 nautical mile range.
Yeah.
Oh man, you wouldn't. Yeah. What strikes me is that given that capability, you might just end up settling somewhere and never want to go anywhere, right? I mean, who knows what effect that would have?
Yeah, because it's gonna be too easy.
It should be too easy. Nah.
Yeah.
But for surgical strikes to the key zones that we're only now beginning to understand, this would be a good time to do it.
Yeah.
Let's get a startup going, Maciek. Turn this podcast into something real. We'll get Ben to invest in it with all the money he's making at WindsurfingTV, and then we'll be on our way.
Yeah, I like that.
Now maybe I can be the third employee here. I'm looking forward to it, man. This was my whole tryout. This has possibly been your longest interview. I mean, has this not been am I breaking the record here? I was hoping.
I don't know. Jimmy Diaz was quite long as well. I'm not sure where we're at, but we're over 2 hours for sure.
Solid.
Yeah, but it's fun. They go fast. It's like I don't know. I get into it and it's all good.
No. I could talk to you all day here. Don't think that you're tying me back from any sailing. I think today's one of the first days where it's actually just gone to trade swell. We're looking outside here at our haiku passing squalls. It's 11:30 in the morning, but maybe not anybody out yet. It's probably at that one little moment where it clears and it'll get good, and Jimmy Hepp will walk down to his spot and start shooting the local guys, and life on Maui will permeate into what it is. Yeah, and it's such a beautiful thing. We're so lucky to just the simple things like that. This guy goes down there and takes pictures of everybody. We're so lucky. To have that, and it's kind of set the model. Like you see that, the Jose Pina guy doing it at Pozo or whoever else. It's like everybody wants to see the world of windsurfing, and it's not all just about Ho'okipa, but Ho'okipa does have that little place in our hearts that always will be there. And I think everybody here looks at the outside world just as adoringly, look at all these other cool places you can go, and how good it gets at certain places sometimes. And man, if the Baltic can do it, where else? Seriously.
Yeah, let's not compare Baltic to Ho'okipa, please. Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Okay, I will.
Okay, it's 10:30 p.m. here. So, last but not least, who'd you like to hear on this show?
Right on. Well, have you had Campello on?
Yeah. It was
that
funny.
That
Him
was
imitating Martin Brandner.
Yeah, no, okay, that's right. I remember that. Oh, that was.
Really made my day.
You started the whole thing with Josh, which was a good way to go. Josh's interview is legendary.
Yeah.
I would love for you to have Mark Angulo. Bring him on. You're gonna have a good long talk with a wise man who just understands very many things about where he's been and the rights and the wrongs of what he saw as his perspective is one of a kind. You'd have a long, good talk with him. He's doing good. I speak with him all the time. So that would be my vote, Mark Angulo. And, Keith DeBull would be a very interesting person to talk to. He's got a million, stories from back in the day, but one of our contemporary, pillars and icons on Maui. I think he'd have a lot of interesting things to say. Who else? Let me think about that one. How about Jaeger Stone?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I might.
Bring it down under. Jaeger's world title material, but he's also got a life outside of windsurfing and a profession outside of it.
He's sneaky funny too. Like he'd grill you and you'd realize like after a week,
He'll give you a run for your money. Yeah, bring on Jaeger next. That's my final vote. Jaeger Stone.
Yeah.
Bring him on.
Okay, Kai, thanks a lot. Thanks for the history lesson and for the unique perspective and just for the sheer talking ability, I guess. I kind of envy that. Can talk yourself out of anything, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, thanks for taking the scenic route on those questions with me. I know I bend the rules of those questions. I have a lot on my mind, so I like to speak it.
Yeah.
And keep ripping hard, Maciek, and everybody out there. And let's get through 2020 in style here and bring a new year on us and a whole new set of adventures. Looking forward to it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, aloha.
And there we go, Kai Katchadourian. I told you he could speak more than me. If you liked that episode, give us a thumbs up and leave us a comment who you want to see. Do you want to see any legends out there that you really want? We've got a long list. We've contacted a lot of people. We're just waiting for them to get back to us. But hope you've been enjoying the podcasts. Like I say, give us the feedback. I'll put the links up above for old podcasts and maybe the whole podcast list. Lockdown now, so you can get into them. There's quite a few on there. If you want to chip in some beer money as well, support the channel and keep these things flowing, it would be very welcome. I'll put the link below. It's thirsty work. And there we go. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe so you don't miss the podcast every Wednesday. Plus Send It Sunday every Sunday. We've got a few more videos coming in. We'll see you next time.